It is Tuesday night in East Lansing, Michigan. My name is Jim Comparoni, publisher, SpartanMag.com. Come on in, gather around, behave yourselves, or don't behave yourselves. It's a Tuesday. Some of you have tomorrow off. Everybody's going to have Thursday off. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody out there, all the Michigan State fans, all the Michigan State enemies, even the enemies. Happy Thanksgiving to them also, most of them. Ready to talk some Michigan State football, Michigan State basketball, maybe a little recruiting, maybe a little bit of program going forward, getting ready. It's Thanksgiving week. I love Thanksgiving week. I can't stand it. I love it so much. It's great. Big game this week, Spartan Stadium. Michigan State Spartans. What are they ranked tonight? Number 12 in the country. Fabulous season, 9-2. Tough loss at Ohio State last weekend. No one's surprised by the loss. I think everybody that follows Michigan State would have liked to have seen the Spartans be more competitive. That was an eye-opener. Michigan State inept with pass defense. Ohio State electrifying with pass offense. Ohio State looked very good. Great atmosphere down there. I think I would go as far as to say it was a friendly atmosphere even. The Michigan State fans I spoke with that were down there tailgating before the game, and those that I spoke with after the game, no real incidents, which is news coming out of Columbus. That's good. So Michigan State 9-2, big one this weekend against Penn State. The Nittany Lions come in 7-4, I think is their record. Been playing pretty good football. Shut out Rutgers last week, 28-0. Rutgers had a bout, and they're still experiencing a bout with the flu, severe flu. Severe for 21-year-olds. I think there were 30 to 35 players affected by it last weekend. Coach James Franklin said of Penn State at his press conference earlier today. And Sean Clifford, good quarterback, played most of the first quarter, and then Franklin sat him down because he was battling the flu also. So are they finished with the flu, or are they still having ramifications from it? That'll have an impact on the game this weekend. Michigan State trying to win the land-grant trophy, trying to remain undefeated at home at Spartan Stadium this weekend, trying, as they say, to send the Spartan seniors out as winners. We'll talk about those things. Hope to get a call from Ron Big Moobie Armstrong again, hoping for that tonight. Just texted him. Never know. He's a busy man. Never know. Hope we get hear from him. The way this works, my name is Jim Comparoni, publisher, SpartanMag.com. SpartanMag.com is the site covering Michigan State sports for Rivals.com. And over at the Underground Bunker message board, we invite Michigan State fans, maggers as they're called, Spartan maggers, to post questions. And we field those questions here every week, mailbag style. Excuse me. And we will take those questions here, mailbag style, and also feel free to post comments and questions over in the chat area. I will field questions over there as well. And we'll talk a little bit. We got some good questions tonight about Michigan State football, a little bit of basketball, and other things. Give us a thumbs up. That's good for our SpartanMag.com YouTube channel. Also subscribe. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel here. We're getting close to 5,000 subscribers here on the YouTube channel. I'm really excited about that. A lot of you may remember, I think it was about a year and a half ago, 2 summers ago. It was before the COVID. It was the summer before COVID. We launched this channel. We had a drive to try to get it over 1,000, and we did get it over 1,000. I really thank you guys and gals for doing that and making that possible. The site keeps getting bigger. It keeps drawing more Michigan State fans as the algorithms load in, and Michigan State fans that go looking for Michigan State content on YouTube, they start finding this channel and this show and our interviews, our post-game interviews, our weekly press conference interviews. In that way, it helps promote Michigan State sports, which I'm sure a lot of you are interested in, but also it supports and promotes SpartanMag.com, which is something I started, way back at the beginning of the internet. It's basically small business. Small business is what we are. So you can support small businesses by giving us a thumbs up. And you don't have to wait till Small Business Monday to do that this week, Feast Week. It's basketball, it's football, it's a great week. Red Wings are at home also Thanksgiving Eve every Wednesday. That'll be a fun one. Just a great time of year. Anyway, let's go right to the questions. Question number 1 from Orange County, California. Spartan Fan 81 says, do you have any thoughts on any potential staff changes for Michigan State on defense going into next year? Do you expect changes, or do I think changes are needed, or do you think it's purely talent issues? It's a tough one because we are still getting accustomed to Mel Tucker and the way he does things. With Mark D'Antonio, you could rest assured there wouldn't be any changes, for better or worse. Some people got a little bit, they lost their patience with that a little bit. And, Michigan State's defense, pass defense, dead last in the country in pass yardage. And those of you that follow our work over at SpartanMag.com and here at SpartanMag.com YouTube channel, I thought that Michigan State's pass defense was not as bad as the statistics through the first 7 or 8 games of the year, and I thought that there was a trend upward, an upward trend for Michigan State's pass defense heading into the Michigan game, and I was dead wrong. Went into the Michigan game, and all of a sudden, Cade McNamara looked like John Elway out there. Well, not exactly, but he looked pretty good. And Michigan State's pass defense not good on that day, and it's gotten worse since then. Good in the first quarter against Maryland, although I think the cold weather might have had something to do with that, with Tagovailoa. Obviously terrible against Purdue, but I think Purdue's pass offense is excellent. Everybody knows Ohio State's pass offense is excellent. Penn State has a pretty good pass offense when Sean Clifford is right. Jahan Dotson leads the Big Ten in receptions. And I think he's the first player in Big Ten history to have, I don't know what, there's some, inside of 10 games, it's something like 80 catches and 9 touchdowns. There's some combination of statistics that he's put up that I'm not sure anyone in the Big Ten has ever done in 10 games. So Dotson's very good. Keep an eye on him, number 5, the wide receiver for Penn State. So Michigan State's pass defense, I would go as far as to say has regressed against Ohio State. We'll talk about that later on today, some of the things that went wrong. We won't take all night talking about it. You guys saw what happened. Some of it was talent. Xavier Henderson was talking about, some of these guys, his teammates. You can look on film and see that Ohio State was fast, but until you get on the field with them, you don't realize how fast they are. That was Xavier Henderson speaking from experience, having played Ohio State previously, and he said that to his teammates going into that game, and then saw evidence of, some of the ramifications of that blowing up in Michigan State's face, specifically receivers running by cornerback Kimbrough on one occasion, Chester Kimbrough, and Marquis Lowry on another occasion. And as bad as Michigan State's pass defense has been, those guys, Kimbrough and Lowry, they've not been bad. Lowry missed a lot of time at the beginning of the year and in the middle of the year. I thought he hit pretty hard against Maryland. Kimbrough was pretty good earlier in the year. No question, they got boat raced a couple times deep by those guys, and then Angelo Gross not getting as deep as the deepest on a couple of those. Honoring the run, maybe, honoring digs underneath, a little bit of both. So you're asking, we'll get into, is it purely talent issues? Again, we'll get into this a little bit later, but coaching changes, after that Purdue game, I think Tucker could put some people, I don't want to say on blast a little bit, but he has said in the past that he's going to be demanding. He's going to confront and demand. He's going to do that with his coaches also. I agree with Tucker when he says stats are for losers and passing statistics don't always tell the whole story. I think Auburn won a national title when they ranked like number 80 or 90 or 116. Maybe not 116, but worse than number 75 or 80 in pass defense. Notre Dame played for the national championship one year against Alabama when they were outside of the top 60 or 70 in pass defense. You can be ranked between 70 and 90 in pass yardage allowed and still compete for a lot of big things. Yards per pass attempt is a more telling statistic, as you've heard me say over the years. But this year, closing out the season, pick any stat, and Michigan State is terrible when it comes to pass defense, except for maybe red zone pass defense, and that blew up this past weekend as well. So when you're ranking that poorly in pass defense, something is wrong. And we know Harlan Barnett's been a great coach in the past, so I assume that he's doing all he can, and there's not a problem there. Coming into the season, looking at the defensive backs, it was a fair question. You've got so many new faces there in the defensive backfield. How many, how are they going to be able to have what I call the same pageness, being on the same page, the rapport to play together without having played together in the spring? Can they get that all down in one preseason in August? And they didn't look bad against Northwestern. Poor quarterback in offense there, although they got beat deep once. Ronald Williams did. Then he didn't start the next week. Then he started the third week. bend but don't break against Miami, was successful. Had problems against Western Kentucky, who I said was a very good team for a mid-major, and they then lost to Texas San Antonio, who had bounced around in the top 25. It was a very good mid-major, and then Western Kentucky has since won about 6 straight. I think they play Marshall this weekend, and they'll probably end up 8-4. And I tell you what, Michigan State would not want to play Western Kentucky again. They're scoring 50 points on everybody. So they put up Michigan State allowed numbers in that game, which skewed their stats. And then, the pass defense was not terrible against Rutgers, who does not have a very good pass attack, a poor one as a matter of fact, and not bad against Indiana, who also had trouble through the air. You know what happened through the course of the season. But I thought things were trending positively, and I thought I was kind of impressed. Of course, Michigan State starts 6-0, 7-0, 8-0. No one knew about Kenneth Walker. Michigan State was very good in a lot of ways to go 8-0 and become the number 6 team in the country. I think they were. And pass defense, the same pageness, especially in the red zone, was surprisingly good. And I thought that was a good sign for Michigan State defense and the structure and the way they teach things and so forth. But it's all blown up lately. And, I'm not sure which way it's going to go. Does Mel Tucker bring everybody back and they just get right back to work, maybe hit the portal a little bit more, or do they chop some heads? I'm not sure. You will learn as I go in terms of the way Mel Tucker is going to approach this. But I don't think anything. I don't take anything off the table. I'm not sure. So I don't know. We'll see how they do against Penn State. It's gonna be tough to play defense against them, and we'll see what happens from there. Hope you guys don't mind. I put some flannel on this weekend. It's about 35 degrees in East Lansing earlier today. Nice, bright, sunshiny day. 35 degrees, if I can use my George Kell voice. And right now it's going to be below the freezing mark. It's feeling like football. It's going to be bright and clear and sunny on Saturday, I think, Spartan Stadium. Spartan Stadium is not going to be full. That's the way it is around Thanksgiving weekend, the way it's been. A lot of people in Michigan go hunting. George Perlos used to talk about that. Hard to fill the stadium during that weekend. Some of you might be watching at your deer camp right now on your phone. If so, appreciate you guys tuning in. Hope you guys are good and safe and having a good time. And, but those of you that are going to be at Spartan Stadium, you're good people. And I'll see some of you over there. There's always people that say hello to me when I'm walking to the stadium and so forth. It's always great to see you guys. And those of you that are going to be there, you'll be loud and you'll be good fans. And I've got a lot of respect for you. There's a lot of you that will not be there for other reasons, seeing family members and so forth during the Thanksgiving holiday. I understand that also. But those of you that are at the stadium, you're good fans, and I hope you have a good day on Saturday. Question number 2, Alex from Los Angeles, California. He says, what are my thoughts on Walker's ankle for the week? Walker's ankle. Kenneth Walker III, heretofore a leading contender for the Heisman Trophy. He's a dandy. It's been great to follow him. Been great to cover him this year. I saw him over at the Michigan State football building today, and just briefly as I was going over to the press conference. Ron Burton, defensive line coach, spoke. Also Peyton Thorne, Connor Hayward, Trey Mosley, and some others. Kenneth Walker did not speak. He was just in there having lunch. Amber Reinstein was over there also. Nice, friendly kid. He saw me from across the room. He waved. I waved. Not that he knows who I am. A lot of these players get to know who we are as media members as their recruits and as we cover them during their time at Michigan State. He's been here such a short time, and half of it has been he had COVID blocks everywhere. Haven't had a chance to really get to know some of these players, but really a humble, agreeable, approachable, impressive young man. I mean, those of you that are Michigan State fans are rooting for him, obviously, but you have even more reason to root for him because he's a good young man. It's too bad that he wasn't around the program longer, or hasn't been around the program longer, because I think he would have had a great impact in the community. Still may in the future. But anyway, there's a picture of him right there with Lorenzo White, the last major Heisman Trophy candidate at Michigan State. And I know Kenneth Walker is pretty impressed with the stats when he looks back at the record books and sees that Lorenzo White once rushed for over 2,000 yards in 11 games. Actually, 2,000 yards in 12 games, counting the bowl game that year in 85, I think it was, when he was a sophomore, when White was a sophomore. But Kenneth Walker III, his ankle, he looked in good spirits today. I didn't really stick around to watch to see how he was walking. I didn't look at him to see if there was a boot on or anything. I don't do that. But he gave everything he could at Ohio State, had 3 or 4 carries there early in the game, and had a couple of good runs, enough that, Herb Street was impressed as he was giving his play-by-players color commentary, calling him a special running back. This is the first time Herb Street had seen him live, and in only 2 or 3 carries, Walker showed what he's about with his ability to cut. When Walker cuts, he doesn't take 2 or 3 steps to cut. He cuts on one step cut. And he does it with leg strength and explosion, and he does it against the grain in ways that, I don't want to say defy physics, because nothing defies physics, right? But that's his secret sauce, is that. And then he's got the acceleration to go and the physicality through it. And only had about 3 or 4 good carries in that game and got up and hurt his ankle early in the second half, and he was done. I've heard some national talk shows this week, Barrett Sallee on Sirius Satellite, and also I think Mark Packer on Sirius Satellite. I really have a lot of respect for the work that they do, but I don't think they got the memo on Kenneth Walker's injury. They were talking about how Kenneth Walker had a bad game this weekend and really knocked him out of the Heisman. Well, he had an unproductive game, and they're talking about it because he had a bad game and Michigan State was blown out in the scoreboard, and that hurts his chances, which is all true. But none of them ever mentioned that he had a bad ankle and finished that Maryland game on a bad ankle. I heard that his ankle was really badly swollen at about this time last week. I heard about that on Wednesday or so. I didn't come out and report it that way, but those of you that heard me on radio shows, the Huge Show and the Stout Show and some of those others, let's see, what Mad Dog Show in Lansing, I said whatever version of Kenneth Walker's out there, or, I kind of insinuated that we didn't know, but I had heard that he worked real hard just to get on the field, and he didn't have many plays to give them. He tried, and he was done. But I don't think the national pundits understand that he was playing hurt that day. You don't get a pass in the Heisman race for being hurt. I'm just saying that he didn't have a bad game. He did what he could. He was limited. And some of those runs were blocked pretty well, but he turned 4-yard gains into 15-yard gains once or twice, or 9 or 10-yard gains. And one was called back for, was it holding or something? But, the thing is, it's hard for a running back to stay in the Heisman chase these days. Back in the 70s and 80s, it was a succession of tailbacks winning the Heisman Trophy. Lorenzo White almost won it, came in 3rd or 4th behind Chuck Long, Bo Jackson, and I think Robbie Bosco nudged ahead of him also when he was a sophomore. Senior year was Tim Brown, or was that the year Bosco also moved ahead of him? Not sure. But anyway, back in the 70s and early 80s, it was running back, because back then, it was a run-oriented era, and it was easier for the best running backs to remain consistent week after week after week. The top running backs at USC, Oklahoma, Nebraska, week after week could put up the numbers. In this day and age, it's easier for the quarterbacks to consistently put up numbers week after week after week after week. System quarterbacks, some are very talented. Some just shoot it around, and the way the rules are and the way the game has evolved, it's easier for a quarterback to just go out there and put up 275, 300 yards, 325. Easy for me to say, but that's just the way it looks. It's harder for a running back week after week to put up numbers week after week after week. Those that have, Derrick Henry did it at Alabama, and Ingram did it at Alabama, and they're the only running backs that have won it in the last 10 or 15 years, right? Someone can correct me on that. It's hard for a running back to do it. Running back also is more dependent on the offensive line. Of course, quarterbacks are dependent on the offensive line also and the receivers. But you take a running back like Kenneth Walker, it's hard for running backs to win it anyway. And you put him behind an offensive line at Michigan State that's been pretty good this year, but not quite good, not really good, and certainly not great, like those Alabama offensive lines that blocked for Henry and Ingram. So, disadvantage to play running back in this day and age to try to win the Heisman. Tough to do it against a merely pretty good offensive line, behind a pretty good offensive line. and then the wear and tear, the ankle goes, and he had a great run. And he may, who knows, maybe he'll explode against Penn State, but I doubt it because Penn State plays good defense. They stop the run. They've got good speed. They play correctly. They play as a team. It's going to be real difficult to put up big numbers this year for this weekend for Kenneth Walker. But he was outstanding. He was a lot of fun to watch. And I'm assuming it's going to be his last game at Michigan State this weekend. He really was entertaining, gave us a lot of thrills, didn't he? So Kenneth Walker, I'm sure a lot of you will be out there checking him out and giving him a hand, and he certainly deserves that. In the meantime, I want to invite everybody to head over to SpartanMag.com and become a subscriber to SpartanMag.com. If you're not familiar with it, this is what the front page looks like right now as we speak. Paul Konerdijk with a couple of good articles. Always great articles, good coverage from Paul Konerdijk. Tuesday notebook, Spartans need defensive line to bring it against Penn State. That's by Paul Konerdijk. He also did the story. Ron Burton says they need to win their one-on-ones on the defensive line against Penn State's offensive line. There's a picture of Paul Konerdijk and I outside the Spartan Stadium earlier today with the VCast, talking about Michigan State, Penn State, and other things from the press conference. We went about 20, 25 minutes talking about that. Jason Killip with a really good story about Eno Etta. It's a defensive end. That's Radar. It's part of our Radar 23 series, talking about class of 2023. Those are the current juniors that Michigan State's recruiting. That's a national top 200 kid, that 200 player that Michigan State recently offered a scholarship to. He's ranked number 185 in the country by Rivals.com, the number 10 defensive end. His name is Eno Etta. He's from Covenant Christian Academy in Colleyville, Texas. Michigan State offered him on October 21st. Ron Burton extended that offer. He's 6'5", 220. During the bye week, Michigan State linebackers coach Ross Els went down there and met with him. So during the bye week, Michigan State was busy down there in Texas. Ross Els met with him. Jason Killip with the latest on Eno Etta from the Radar 23 series, and also coverage from the press conference earlier this week. So go over to SpartanMag.com. If you're not already a subscriber, get over there, become a subscriber. You'll probably love it. As far as Michigan State goes this weekend, Trey Mosley right there, wide receiver, a guy that's got to have a big game this weekend. Not sure about Jaden Reed, not sure about Jalen Naylor. Jalen Naylor was spotted in practice. My guy, Chris Solari, saw it at one of the hype videos that was going out that Michigan State put out, and I went and watched that video. And, I mean, Jalen Naylor is on there for like a frame, like a fraction of a second. Solari's pretty good at keeping her nose to the ground on those injury issues, and he spotted that one. So Naylor was in uniform. Not sure what kind of contact he's doing. Looked like he had some sort of wrap on his hand. Had a hand injury. Everybody knows that during the Michigan game. So Naylor, can he come back? We'll have to wait and see. Jaden Reed was hurt at the end of that Ohio State game. His situation, they're not saying. But Trey Mosley is a guy that's put up good numbers, had a big play against Ohio State early in the second half, one of Michigan State's only explosive offensive plays, a nice little run and catch up the left sideline. A guy that's had success in the past. You might remember back in 2019, Michigan State would not have made a bowl game were it not for Trey Mosley coming on strong at the end of the year, made his debut against Penn State, had a couple of catches in a 28-7 loss. But he really had a coming-out party as a freshman against Maryland later that year as Michigan State won. I think that was on senior day at home. Trey Mosley was a breakthrough player that day. I don't think they beat Missouri without Trey Mosley as a true freshman back in 2019, and they don't go to a bowl game without winning that game. Trey Mosley was a big help late in that season as Michigan State had injuries at wide receiver. And then Trey Mosley had a couple of big plays in the Pinstripe Bowl against Wake Forest, including one that he really snatched out of the air for either the go-ahead game-winning drive or a very important instrumental drive late in that game that helped put the game away when Wake Forest was still hanging around a little bit. But Trey Mosley, a junior now, talking about wanting to be needing to step up and be more of a leader, and that'll carry over to next season as well. Trey Mosley, an important one for this weekend as Michigan State gets ready to take on the Nittany Lions. Tom Izzo and the Michigan State basketball Spartans. What are they, 3-1? Nice win at Butler last weekend. I was over at Hinkle Fieldhouse. That was fun. Looked pretty good against Eastern Michigan in a lot of ways. Now they're in the Bahamas for the battle for Atlantis. And some interesting teams in the field out there in Atlantis. Really interesting. You know, they'll be playing Loyola to begin with. Loyola's been a mid-major power of recent years. They're their coach, Porter Moser, has moved on to Oklahoma. So Drew Valentine, with strong Michigan State ties, the new head coach at Loyola. And Loyola, I think, is 3-0 or 4-0. Of course, Drew Valentine, the brother of Spartan great Denzel Valentine and the son of former Michigan State great Carlton Valentine. And Loyola, they were hurt by injury. They lost the big dude, Krutwig. Remember that guy? The point center. He was great. He's gone. Mosier, they've lost some people. But Loyola, they got a transfer. I've not seen them play, but they got a transfer kid from Princeton. It's averaging like 15 games for them. Ryan Schweiger is his name. Loyola's 4-0. So Michigan State's playing Drew Valentine. Drew Valentine was a student manager at Michigan State 3 or 4 years ago, and he had a really good career at Oakland University. Became a student manager at Michigan State. And he's on the Izzo coaching tree. And now Izzo goes against him. And Izzo's known that kid since he was in elementary. So that's going to be interesting and kind of special down there in the Bahamas. By the time you watch this, they play at noon on Wednesday. By the time many of you are watching this, that game will have already been played. And, Michigan State, maybe they'll be moving on. Baylor and Auburn are also interesting teams. If they win, they might be playing Baylor second. They might be playing Auburn second. Auburn is 3-0. Got a guy named K.D. Johnson, and he's a 6-foot guard, dangerous scorer. And if chalk holds, I think Michigan State's playing pretty well. So I think they're going to be in the top 25 in a couple of weeks. They don't, Izzo teams don't usually win these type of tournaments, so I'm not sure they're going to win this tournament, but it wouldn't surprise me. And as far as on the other bracket, the other side of the bracket, defending national champion Baylor is over there. They graduated 4 starters, but they're 4-0. And Baylor is looking like Baylor right now. They got a guy, L.J. Cryer, who came off the bench last year. He's a sophomore, 6'1". This guy Cryer is averaging 53%. He's shooting 53% from three-point range. He's playing like those Baylor guards did last year. So that's going to raise the question, if Michigan State's fortunate enough to play Baylor, and wouldn't that be fun, who plays defense on that guy at 6'1"? He's more of a. I've not seen Baylor play, so I'm not sure if he's a pure lead guard, point guard, or if he's a shooting guard coming off screens and so forth. So, does Michigan State have a perimeter stopper right now? Gabe Brown's 6'8", but I just don't like the way he moves laterally. He's working on it. He's a good kid. He's going to get driven a little bit. He's kind of oversized out there in the perimeter. He's doing everything he can. He's a good captain, and he works hard. In all due respect, I'm just talking analytically in terms of observations. He's gotten better with his lateral movement, but he needs to continue to get better. And I'm not sure he's a guy that can guard someone who's 6'1". So does that fall on a Max Christie, who's playing pretty good defense this year as a true freshman? Jaden Akins is a guy that's really coming along as a defensive player and athlete, tough, coachable, willing to grind. Jaden Akins, for a freshman, he's showing a lot of mettle right now. Hit a couple jumpers against Eastern Michigan. Really gets off the court to go to the offensive glass. Skied for an offensive rebound at Butler. Jaden Akins has some really good basketball ahead of him. I've not seen how Imani Bates has done at Memphis. I saw his stat line. He was 2 out of 10 against somebody, Seton Hall or something like that. But if I put that question out to you, if you could have either player right now and only one, would you rather have Imani Bates or Jaden Akins right now? Nothing against Imani Bates, but I'd take Jaden Akins. I'd take Jaden Akins right now. Hey, Imani Bates might Carmelo-ize Memphis this year. I'm not sure. Does he come back for a second year? I don't know. The ages and the numbers and all that stuff. But Jaden Akins is going to be a program guy. It's my prediction at Michigan State. As far as Baylor goes, Kendall Brown, 6'8", freshman who's doing some damage for Baylor now. And Baylor's got a transfer from Arizona, James Akinjo, 6'1", senior. Played at Georgetown. He was Big East Freshman of the Year at Georgetown. Transferred to Arizona, was first team All Pac-12 for Arizona. Left Arizona. And, of course, they still have Everyday John. You guys remember Everyday John? That's Gabe Brown right there. But Everyday John is the guy. I can't pronounce his last name. power forward, strong guy for Baylor. You'll recognize him when the time comes for Michigan State to play Baylor, if it comes to that. And that'd be fun if it happens. That'd be on Friday. That'd be Black Friday if that happens. Let's go here to the chat area and see what kind of shenanigans we got going on over there. Appreciate everybody checking in and being a part of SpartanMag Live on a Tuesday night, Thanksgiving week. Yeah, I'm going grunge a little bit. I'm going flannel. Just walking around the woods a little bit today after the press conference. Just getting some fresh air. It's a great time. Thanksgiving week. I love it. Love it. Let me go back over here. Let me go back to this one. All right, Rob South says, what's up, fellas? Rob South is in first. Eric M. from Roswell, Georgia. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Hard Knocks 27 says, what's up, Rob? Old Tuck, the Bell Cows here. Hard Knocks 27, happy Thanksgiving. And Steve S., happy Turkey Day. So we got Rob South running the point. Eric M. is on the wing. Hard Knocks 27. Sounds like a power forward. Old Tuck in the middle. And Steve S. is the sweet shooting guard. That's a starting five for today. Old Tuck says, we'll have a lighter crowd tonight as the fair weather fans filter out, and that's fine. That's what Old Tuck says. Ben G says, let's go Lions. Lions, baby. Lions. Got some hot cider tonight, people. What do we have there? Not a sponsor, but it's the Island House Hotel, Mackinac Island. Check it out. Not a sponsor yet. Gordon Tonona says, go green. Hard Knocks 27 says, go white. Mike Harvey says, what's going on? Old Tuck says, I've been watching, rooting, and following since the early 80s, so I've seen a lot of front-runner fans come and go. Jim McCarthy says, go white. Eric says, go green. John C. says, go white. All right, this is all going on before we went live. Old Tuck he's not a fair weather fan. He's not a good weather fan. He's an all-weather fan. All weather, Old Tuck. All these guys are. Rob South, the rest of them. All right, these guys, let me know that the sound was okay. Keith Tunstall says, one bad game should not define this season. Go green. Coach Mel Tucker for Coach of the Year. Just got a text. Had to answer that one. Anyway, one bad game should not define the season. It was a bad game, all right. You know, I wrote in the .comp article at SpartanMag.com after the game that it was the most overmatched I'd ever seen a Michigan State defense. I've never seen a Michigan State defense that overmatched. Now, against Penn State, the year that Bobby Williams was fired, the team had pretty much quit. They lost 61-7, and they just didn't want to make contact and tackle Larry Johnson. They just didn't show up. They didn't want to compete. It was a tough deal. But I don't know if they were like, I mean, these guys that Michigan State was playing on Saturday, Michigan State was trying to compete, and they were just, you saw it. They were overmatched. Michigan State only forced, 3 third down plays in the first half. You guys saw the numbers. Numbers were. I'm trying to move my microphone so you can see the cornucopia back there. Got the cornucopia. I can't do it. It worked fine during rehearsal. I'm joking. We don't have rehearsal. Anyway, it was as overmatched as the Michigan State defense as I've ever seen. So I can understand it was a bad game and it was a huge stage. So it was more than just a bad game. It was a bad game, bad look, big stage. That's a difficult mixture. But it does not define the season necessarily at all. Michigan State's done great work to get to this point. Everybody knows that. But Ohio State at this time of year really cranks it up. And Michigan State was just kind of hanging by a thread going into that game. And you saw what happened. Noah Sprunger. We love Noah Sprunger. Does a great job with recruiting coverage over at SpartanMag.com. Intern extraordinaire. Great to have him here. Great to have him everywhere. Ben Golf 9, Blake Wagner. Do we have some young defensive backs to develop? Young defensive backs. Well, you know, Marquis Lowry is a redshirt freshman. Chuck Brantley's a true freshman, so I guess they count. Angelo Gross has got to come around. He's a true sophomore safety. Darius Snow is a nickel. Darius Snow played safety in the second half of that game. Some of you guys might have turned it off by then. But he moved from nickel, and in the second half, he played Xavier Henderson's position. And Michael Dowell came off the bench and played Darius Snow's usual position. There's the cornucopia. There it is. What do we have to do to make this happen? What do we have to do to make this happen? Let's make it happen. There we go. There we go. We're low tech here. It's kind of the Wayne's World of Michigan State sports. So, what were we talking about? Yeah, Brantley, Nano Death mentioned, Brantley's a young guy. They've got to come around. Gross, Angelo Gross, bless his heart, plays hard, good, tough tackler. Got a lot of respect for him. Coming into the year, I wondered about him moving to safety. Did not see him play safety, I don't think, in the spring game. Heard he was moving to safety, saw it in preseason practice a little bit, and then we saw it in the open practice over at Spartan Stadium. And you might remember some of the big plays, quote unquote big plays that took place during that open practice, like the second week of August over at Spartan Stadium, a couple of the long passes. Well, Angelo Gross was involved in a couple of those. And being on the same page and learning, safeties and corners have to work together so much in terms of changing how coverage might adapt to a certain trade or a certain motion, certain formation changes. They just have to. It has to become like clockwork, sometimes unspoken communications. So I was wondering, how good would they be able to do this with all the new faces? And secondly, Angelo Gross, who came in as a corner last year, played as a nickel and did a really good job moving him back to the back line. There's times when Michigan State likes to take those safeties from the back line and put them up in press coverage in the slot. So ideally, they would like those safeties to be big, hard-hitting guys that can come up and play press coverage, if that's what they call for. Of course, Georgia can do it. Alabama can do it. Not many others can do it. It's good to say you want to do it, but difficult to do. They tried to do that with Angelo Gross in the Michigan game. That Michigan State tried to become a little bit more aggressive defensively with their coverages, and Michigan, by the end of the game, they were targeting Gross and going after him in the slot and getting a lot of productivity against him. From that point forward in the subsequent games, he's been less of a slot corner in man-to-man. He's been the single safety deep, and Henderson has come up and played more of the slot coverage. And he's done okay. Henderson's a good, strong safety type, good run-fit guy. Maybe not a guy that ideally will come up and play slot man-to-man. They don't do it a lot, but he's a better choice than Gross to do that. Michigan State played a little bit of man-to-man early in the game, blitzed, I think, 2 of the first 6 or 7 plays. Looking back at it, they didn't blitz much after that. Of course, Ohio State had a really good opening drive. But looking back at it, I suspect that Michigan State wanted to blitz on the second play of the game just to show that they would play man-to-man blitz, when in actuality they planned to not play much man-to-man blitz. They just wanted to show it once and then not play it and see if the rest of the game plan could work. And, of course, it did not. Not much was going to work that day, I don't think. But I digress, talking about Gross there a little bit. Ben Chee says, can the Lions beat the Bears? Yes, the Lions can beat the Bears. No, they can't beat the Bears. I was listening to the Lions game on the way back from Columbus on Sunday. I've not read much of the scuttlebutt or listened to the talk shows in Detroit, but if I'm not mistaken, I think Detroit was down 3 or 4, and it was 3rd and 14 with 2 minutes to go, and they ran the ball. Gained like 2 yards and punted and never got the ball back. That's interesting. I'm guessing that they wanted to run the ball and get it to like 4th and manageable, 4th and 5, and then go for it. And they must have thought there's a very good chance they were going to gain 8 or 9 on that 3rd and 14. And then they gained 2, and then they punted. They invent new ways to lose. That's true. John C. says, is it DB talent? Is the D-line not getting enough pressure, or is it the scheme? Well, the schemes, I mean, they're running cover 2 and cover 3 and cover 1 like everybody else. So they're running the same things everybody else does. And, Michigan State scheme-wise was able to manufacture some pretty good pass rush early in the season. They were among the leaders in the country in sacks earlier in the season. Through the first 2/3 of the season, they led the Big Ten in sacks. I think they're second or third now. Ohio State has surpassed them. So the pass rush has dried up. Some of that was individual talent. Beasley had a good first half of the season. And Panashuk, a very good first half of the season. Not quite as good now. Drew Jordan has had some moments. But, some of the pass rush earlier in the year was coming from the interior with Jacob Slade and Simeon Barrow. Simeon Barrow is out now. Haven't seen him since the ejection against Purdue. It's a health situation with him. I'm not expecting him to play this weekend against Penn State. Jacob Slade was, I thought, having like an all Big Ten type of season. I'm not sure if it's first team or second team or third team, but he would have gotten, and it still may get some Big Ten consideration, all Big Ten acknowledgement. I think he will get all Big Ten honors of some sort. Hurt his ankle against Purdue and was limited in that game. Came back and was okay against Maryland. Played as hard as he could against his home state Buckeyes. Played pretty well, did some good things. But he's not what he was before that ankle injury. And everybody around the country is banged up. You always hear that. But Slade at his best, Barrow at his best, Panashuk and Beasley earlier in the year was a little bit different of a front four. Still decent. But no, they couldn't get pass rush against Ohio State. And Ohio State's offensive line is very good at pass protection. Nebraska got some pass rush against Ohio State late in the game somehow. I don't know if conditioning was a situation with the offensive lineman there or not for Ohio State. Those guys are big. They just engulfed Panashuk. Panashuk is having trouble getting off of him. And sometimes they would chip. They'd send a running back out and double team chip with him and then get the running back out in the route. But no question, pass rush is dried up. It dried up against Purdue. Now, Purdue was getting that ball out in 2 seconds. It's hard to pass rush Purdue. It's hard to pass rush Ohio State. Ohio State's only given up like 6 sacks all year. They don't give up sacks. That's the thing about C.J. Stroud. I mean, he's better than Justin Fields. Fields, and I said this last year when Fields had trouble against Indiana. I thought that was a revealing game. I thought he struggled against Indiana's excellent pass defense. But Fields, all last year, drop back, make one read, and he'd make one read, and if it's open, it's coming out. And he had all the talent, accuracy and arm strength and all that. But it was like one read, it's coming out, or one read, and if it's not there, he's tucking and running, and he's dangerous as a runner. You rarely saw Justin Fields make one check, look over here, and go to a third. And that's the way you can judge processing a little bit. Stroud has been doing that all year. He'll go to a third read. Sometimes he'll look off the safety. Herb Street pointed that out, and then go here, boom, and he's accurate when he has it. Of course, he's got great protection, and he's got great receivers. Very hard to cover those guys. Hard to cover them intermediate, hard to cover them deep. And they put those combinations together, and Ryan Day, very good play caller, play designer, and offensive tactician. I mentioned that last week. That's why he became head coach at Ohio State. That's why Urban Meyer liked him. And if Urban Meyer likes him, that spoke volumes about his talent. So you've got a great chess player, play designer, and Ryan Day, and all the other things are covered. But the thing about Stroud, and he's better than Fields, is making different reads. And he's much better as a younger player than Fields was, although we didn't see Fields as a young player back when he was at Georgia. But, against Indiana changed the look. They were very good last year on pass defense, and it was difficult to read the hieroglyphics. And when Fields struggled against Indiana, that's why when I went to the message board, I'm like, I'm not Gil Brandt, but I would stay away from him in the NFL draft because I didn't think he processed well when he was confronted with a challenging pass defense. And I think he struggled for the Bears this year, right? Cornucopia. Nothing wrong with the corner. We got a cornucopia of Michigan State sports talk going on right now at SpartanMag Live. Great to have everybody here. Excuse my OCD. So anyway, Stroud is so good. You guys saw it. And those receivers are crazy fast. And the combination of it was just a problem. Let's go back over here. Let's go back to the message. Let's go back over here to the mailbag. I was hoping to hear from Big Movie Ron Armstrong. Did not hear him. If we do not, maybe we'll try to get a Skull Session podcast in this week. He and I talked on Saturday night after the game when I was at my hotel in Columbus. I called him back here in East Lansing, and we chopped it up a little bit. I'll be interested to see what he has to say after watching the film a little bit more. All right, Charles from Alexandria, Virginia says, how much roster turnover do you expect to see this offseason or before the bowl game? He says, what positions of need stand out in the portal? So roster turnover? Are you talking about guys going pro early or guys being dismissed from the team or, escorted to the portal? There's going to be some of that. Like Tucker likes to say internally, he's not messing around. Except he doesn't say messing. Look out. Hey, now. I've thought that Michigan State would go after a tight end the last 2 years, and I was wrong. Maybe could have used one this year when the tight end blocking got a little bit fuzzy. But the tight ends are, they're improving. That's one area that's improving right now. Tyler Hunt doing a good job. Couple of catches there when Michigan State was trying to stay in the game at Ohio State. Connor Hayward creeping along, keeps getting a little bit better. Invited this week to go to the Senior Bowl in January, so good for him. He was at the press conference today, and he pretty much, in accepting that invitation in so many words, and today he kind of said it indirectly, that it's time for him to go. He could have stayed for his 6th year, but he's deciding to go, which I understand. I would have liked to have seen if he could have gone to, taken it to another level next year, but understandably he's going. Comes from a family that has NFL background, so they've got pretty good connections and probably pretty good advice. So I'm wondering about running back. Does Michigan State get into the portal for another running back? I mean, Kenneth Walker III, the year that he had, there's no better calling card and advertisement for your program than that. When you take a guy, a 3-star guy that was kind of a second stringer at Wake Forest, you bring him in and you put him on a stage like this, and he becomes a Heisman Trophy candidate. Of course, Walker had great untapped talent on the way in. Can they find someone like that again? Doubtful. Will other running backs out there be interested? Yes. Mid-major tailbacks? People are asking me about Lou Nichols at Central Michigan. Big back out of Cass Tech. Hey, he knows Thomas Wilcher. I mean, Michigan State's going to know all about him. There'll be some conversations there. I don't know where that will lead, but probably nowhere. I've got no inside information on that one, but all cards will be on the table there. They'll know where each other stands, and they'll take a look at him, I'm sure. I'm not saying he's in the portal, so they can't. No tampering, but, I mean, if Lou Nichols were to call his former high school coach, I don't think that would be an outlandish proposition. Offensive line for sure in the portal. You're graduating Horst, Arcuri. Not sure about Jarvis. He's a senior, but, Matt Allen's gone, of course. So they need some offensive line help, offensive tackle help. So I would imagine Michigan State can go out and get an offensive tackle or 2 in the portal this year, maybe an offensive guard. I think 2 offensive linemen in the portal this year. Defensive ends, yes. When they talk about the need to win one-on-one battles, they need to win one-on-one battles at defensive end. They went and got Drew Jordan last year. He's been pretty good this year, second stringer, but, not an impact pass rush headache. Good, solid player. They're glad they have him. The other question from Charles from Alexander says, what do you think it will take Michigan State to be a consistent top 10 program? And how do you think Tucker will accomplish getting better, getting more highly rated recruiting classes given the intense Midwest competition? So the question, what will it take for Michigan State to be a consistent top 10 program? Wow. All right, Mark D'Antonio was a consistent top 10 program in 2013, 14, and 15. Those were 3 straight years. They were a top 5 program. Would you consider that consistent? Yeah, that's darn good. They went 40-5 over a 3-year period and had some good years in 2011 with Kirk Cousins, 2010. Share of a Big Ten title with Hoyer? Did they won? No, they lost the chance for a Big Ten title against Penn State that year. But were they a consistent top 10 team that year? No. Were they consistent top 10 With Saban, no. They were top 10 at the end of the 1999 season, and I think they flirted around with top 10 for a week or two, like in 95. Not 95, that was his first year. 97 maybe for a minute. George Perlis, I think, spent 1 week in the top 10 in his entire career. That was a week after the Rose Bowl. Someone can check my math on that. I think he spent 1 week in the top 10. So being a consistent top 10 program, right now, how many teams are in the top 10? It's a trick question. There's 10. 10 teams are in the top 10. See how that works? How many of those teams are consistent top 10 teams? Just trying to define terms here a little bit. Are these the AP top 10, top 25? Georgia, consistent top 10? Yes. Ohio State, consistent top 10? Yes. Alabama, consistent top 10 team? Yes. So that's 3. Number 4 ranked Cincinnati, are they a consistent top 10 team? No. Number 5 ranked Notre Dame, are they a consistent top 10 team? Their fans they're happy with Brian Kelly, but they're not getting over the hump. They might sneak back into the playoff again this year, but we know what will happen. Is Notre Dame consistent top 10? Yes, I guess. Give it to them. Michigan's number 6. Are they consistent top 10? No. Oklahoma State's number 7. Are they consistent top 10? No. Old Mississippi is number 8. Are they consistent top 10? No. Number 9 is Baylor. Are they consistent top 10? No. Number 10 is Oklahoma. They're 10-1. Are they going to lose to Oklahoma State this weekend? They usually beat Oklahoma State. They better beat them. Is Oklahoma consistent top 10? Yes. Number 11 is Oregon? No. Number 12 is Michigan State? No. Number 13 is BYU? No. Number 14 is A&M? They're trying to get back up there, but no. Number 15, Texas San Antonio? No. Number 16, Utah? Really good team right now, but no. Number 19, Iowa? No. Number 18, Wisconsin? No. But they're darn good. Good program, right? 19 is Houston, 10-1. Keep an eye on that defensive coordinator. Top 10? No. Number 20, Pat Narduzzi. Pittsburgh having a good year at 9-2. Top 10 team? No. 21, Wake Forest? No. 22, Brady Hoke in San Diego State. They're 10-1. Top 10? Consistent top? No. 24, 23, Louisiana Raging Cajuns. Very good baseball program. Consistent top 10 football program? No. 24, NC State? No. 25, Arkansas? No. You get my point. You ask about a consistent top 10 team. How many consistent top 10 teams are there? Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama, maybe Notre Dame, maybe Oklahoma. 5. And Oklahoma is not happy that they can't get over the hump. Notre Dame's unhappy that they can't get over the hump. Can Michigan State be one of those 5? You're asking a lot. So what do they have to do to become a consistent top 10 program? I'm saying you gotta walk before you can run. You gotta run before you can sprint. And what you should be asking is, what do they have to do to be a consistent top 15 program? It's a little bit different story. Top 15 in there. They got to recruit like crazy. D'Antonio got it done with great recruiting in his own way, which was player evaluation and player development. And then had a really good, welcoming program that, players didn't want to leave. There was no portal back then, but they had very little attrition when they really had it rolling. They had players that were happy to stay and be a second stringer, which is extremely rare. Tucker will do it a different way. It's more of a business atmosphere, a lot more cutthroat. And, some of the holdover players had trouble adapting to it. Some players left. Some adapted. But it's a tough way to do it. That's the way Saban did it, and that's the way it's done. That's the way he wants to do it. He wants to recruit nationally. They are getting more attention from recruits nationally. Can they finish and bring those in? We'll have to wait and see. When they bring them in, can they get them to check their egos at the door? That's the other rule that Saban did that Tucker is going to carry out. And Tucker's got the type of personality to stamp that out. He's going to need that. I do think that they will recruit more 4-star recruits in the years ahead than has been the case in the past at Michigan State. I think Tucker is a strong enough personality that he can get those egos stamped down and checked at the door. That's the thing about Saban. Saban, they used to call him the sheriff when he first came to Michigan State. Little dude, but strong bark. Just bark at you and just get things done and get on people's back and shame people for having an ego. To his credit, helped That's one of the aspects that helped them get a lot of wins. It takes a special personality to get that done. Someone like Will Muschamp might have had the Nick Saban blueprint, but didn't have the personality to carry it out. Mel Tucker's got the blueprint, and he quotes it, he adds to it, and he's got the personality to carry it out. Now, in the meantime, they got to get that pass defense straightened out. I mean, that was alarming, what's gone on in the last couple of weeks. And, hey, Tucker was a DB's coach. We know Barnett's a good coach. Travaris Tillman's still getting used to it. I mean, I don't know, Hazelton, defensive coordinator. I don't know where the slippage is, but there's slippage there. Tucker knows it. He's going to be trying to fix it. We'll see what happens. So top 10, you got to recruit well. And for Tucker, he's not going to do it like D'Antonio, and there's more than one way to do it, but Tucker's going to, when Dabo Sweeney got it going at Clemson, they started showing up as a top 20 recruiting juggernaut, top 10 recruiting class juggernaut. They started getting top 10 classes in recruiting before they emerged as a top 10 program. I thought that was one of the great litmus tests of recruiting rankings and the importance of recruiting. Because for a lot of years, you'd see recruiting rankings and it was the same teams with the top recruiting classes every year. Notre Dame, Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama, Oklahoma. Going back 15, 20 years, the same classes have the best recruiting classes. And people were like, well, is this a chicken or the egg type situation? Is it both? Are these recruiting analysts ranking Michigan and Notre Dame so high in recruiting because they know that that'll sell a lot of publications or later on websites? It's a fair question. I didn't know the answer. But Clemson started showing up in the top 10 recruiting rankings. And they weren't like a blue blood program that would move the needle in terms of selling subscriptions or selling magazines, or back in the old days, selling subscriptions to different recruiting publications and recruiting services. They were in the top 10 recruiting classes before they were a great team. That's the other thing. Do recruiting analysts look and say, okay, wow, Clemson's really good, so the recruiting class is probably good, so we better rank the recruiting class high. There was some talk about that too, in terms of chicken or the egg analysis of the analysts. But Clemson defied all of that. They had top 10 recruiting classes before they were a blue blood. All of a sudden, they started getting top 10 recruiting classes at a time when being in the top 10 was not going to sell any extra publications. They authentically and organically had top 10 classes. And then they started having top 10 teams. Then they beat they beat Ohio State in the Orange Bowl, the year that Michigan State, I think, was in the Rose Bowl. Then they beat them again, and then the rest of the story. Got into the college football playoff, bounced around in there, won a national title. 1-2, didn't they? I lost count. Clemson was a great litmus test for that. So the recruiting rankings do mean something. So can Michigan State become a top 10 recruiting class? Penn State's been knocking on the door trying to become that. And right now their defense is bearing that out. The running game for Penn State, not so great. Interestingly, because they've been a great running program for years and years. But this year, they're in the bottom third in rush offense in the Big Ten. They had 143 yards rushing, I think it was, last week against Rutgers. Prior to that, Michigan held them under 100. Ohio State held them under 100. And someone else, like Maryland or somebody, held them under 100. Comfortably under 100. Noah Cain was looking good a couple of years ago. Not so explosive now. Offensive line last weekend against Rutgers, they put up decent numbers, even despite having problems with the flu. So, Penn State in a lot of ways has a roster that reflects that, but they're 7-4 this year. They could very easily be 10-1 right now. They played really well. They played well against Michigan and Ohio State. They did really well against Ohio State. They ran well on defense, ran and tackled and covered really well. The Illinois game, I don't know what the hell that was. Excuse my language. 9-tuple overtime. What's at 9? I know octa overtime. Octa overtime. So what would 9 be? I only go up to octa. Then the Iowa game, Clifford got hurt. They were controlling that game. Put in Roberson, and he was bad. Otherwise, they beat Iowa. Penn State is, and they've had injuries and everything. They're not a complete team because, like I said, they don't run the ball real well. But, the cliche in the NFL is you are what your record says you are. And that's true in the NFL when you're playing everybody in your division twice. College football, you're not necessarily what your record says you are. And Penn State, if they come out Saturday motivated and play well, they can put a good football team together, but good football game together. So Penn State has tried to get into that top 10 realm of recruiting. They've done it. The high-end elite victories have not come. It was looking that way this year. You know, they beat Wisconsin earlier in the year, and they were looking pretty good. And they were up on Iowa, 17-0 at a time when everybody thought Iowa was really good. So Penn State was looking kind of dangerous there for a minute, but they've just not been able to sustain it. But that's what Michigan State, I think that's the trek that Michigan State can follow, is what Penn State did. I'm not saying they can do it. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. But Michigan State's not going to recruit like Ohio State. They can recruit well, and Mel Tucker's going to go more national, and they're going to get more four-star visitors. I'll be interested to see what happens with this 2023 class, because there's some pretty good players from 2023 that were on campus for the Michigan State-Michigan game, and Mel Tucker's getting a name for himself. And I think there's a lot of people that are interested in Mel Tucker. Moms and dads out there of recruits, and high school coaches of recruits. Not for everybody, but for a lot of them. Enough for it to make a difference in a 20 to 25-man class. So I think recruiting potential is there in a big way. And now that they've won some games, it'll spark it. And there's just a lot of things from an administrative standpoint and a support staff standpoint that are just stronger at Michigan State than they've ever been. Every assistant coach has his own assistant coach that helps with recruiting, for instance. That's been funded that way from money that was raised by Mark D'Antonio, principally. So, and then the new football building, you know, Tucker and Izzo had a hand in that. They've taken a real deep. Alan Haller was very instrumental in that before he became athletic director. That the new facilities are going to be outstanding. So you put all that together, I think they're going to recruit well. I think they can recruit maybe at that Penn State level. Now, Penn State is a higher brand than Michigan State. James Franklin's been a good recruiter, and they've done well in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Franklin has gone more national as well, to the point where people in Pennsylvania are like, hey, how come you're not recruiting as many Pennsylvania guys? And he's like, hey, Pennsylvania's not what it used to be. Urban Meyer, when he was recruiting Ohio State, he was not recruiting as many Ohio guys. You know, some Ohio old school people are like, hey, how come you're not recruiting as many Ohio guys? And he's like, hey, Ohio recruiting's not what it used to be. It's still good. Pennsylvania's still good, not what it used to be. Not for those programs and what they wanted to do. Franklin Meyer coming out of the SEC wanting to put together rosters like SEC teams that they had coached against. They went after that kind of talent. And the difference makers in that Ohio State game on Saturday, the quarterback is from California. The receivers, the big three, they're from Texas, and California. So that's where they went to get those guys. Michigan State this weekend, Keon Coleman, could he have a breakthrough? He's from Louisiana. Now, he's a 3-star, but he could play like a 4-star. But I'm not going to sit here and say that Michigan State can map out and recruit like Sweeney did at Clemson, or like Saban did at Alabama, or Kirby Smart did at Georgia. They're just closer to those recruiting population centers than Michigan State is. Can they do it like James Franklin? I think they can. I think it's possible. I'm not predicting it'll happen, but I think that's what Michigan State can shoot for. And Mel Tucker would probably look at me and say, what's with your self-imposed limitations, Jim? We're going to have a top 10 class. We're going to recruit better than Franklin. He might say that, or might think. He won't say that. He might think that. That's what they're going to go for. Another program to emulate would be Oregon, because all of a sudden Oregon started showing up in the top 10 recruiting classes. Texas A&M has also, but Texas A&M, again, in a different recruiting pool of talent. Now, Oregon, they recruit well. There's some talent out there, and they can hit California pretty well, especially with USC being down. And Oregon has had top 10 classes. And this year, it looked like they had broken through when they beat Ohio State back in September, but they've kind of fizzled out. And they were really hammered by Utah last week. Apparently, Oregon's had a lot of injuries. Everybody does, but that shows even a strong roster like they had. And they were physical against Ohio State, and they were quick on the offensive line. And they had better linebacker play than Ohio State did that day. I really studied that game 2 days after that game was played because I was really curious to see how they made it happen. But Oregon does not have great in-state talent. They've got a lot of firepower with the Nike brand. Michigan State does not have great in-state talent. They've got pretty good in-state talent. Hey, Penn State's come into the state of Michigan and gotten 2 or 3 guys a year. So I think Penn State's going to have a harder time doing that now. I think Mel Tucker's going to make that more difficult to do. So I think somewhere between the Penn State example and the Oregon example, from the Michigan State angle, is doable to have consistent top 15 recruiting classes, which has never happened in the recruiting ranking era. Nobody was ranking recruits back in 1965 when Duffy Daugherty was going down south and getting those guys. If there had been recruiting rankings back then, I'm sure you'd have retroactive recruiting rankings with Michigan State doing real well back then. So, I don't know. I don't think it's going to be like that. But I think that it's not outlandish to think that Michigan State can map it out similar to what Penn State and Oregon have done recruiting-wise. Now, that only gets you the groceries. Once you get the groceries, then you need some good cooks and good chef work to put together a great spread. That's where the rest of the rubber meets the road. So recruiting by itself does not get it done. You can ask Larry Coker about that. Question number 4, C. Banks from Birmingham, Michigan says, what do you think it will take for Michigan State to be consistent? I just had that question. Another thing I'll say about Ohio State is keep an eye on Ohio State. Ryan Day is great with X's and O's and all that. Might he look to go to the NFL? I don't know. Secondly, they're recruiting pretty well, but I don't think he's going to recruit as well as Urban Meyer did. Right now he's got a lot of Urban Meyer players. As that changeover continues to take place, will they continue to have this great talent edge that they've had on the Big Ten for a number of years? I have my doubts. I'm not saying he's a bad recruiter. I'm sure he's putting his work in, but Urban Meyer was a maniacal recruiter. And I have a feeling that Ohio State's talent level and talent edge over the rest of the Big Ten is not going to be as pronounced as it's been. All right, question number 5. Adam from Atlanta says, would love to hear a little film breakdown on Ohio State's passing offense against Michigan State's defense. What went wrong? Was it talent scheme, mental lapses, etc.? Also, Jason from Chicago, Wrigleyville says, the first 3 touchdowns, it looked like there should have been safety help. What happened? How did Ohio State's wide receivers get behind our safeties 3 times in a row? The 4th was set up by an incredible catch. Hard to fault that one. Well, when you go back and watch it again, first of all, sometimes ABC had a pretty good camera from the end zone on the replay, but while the play was going on, ABC, they focus in on the ball and you can't see what's going on in the defensive backfield. I hate that. ABC, I'm glad I was there to watch it live to chart the coverages or what I thought were the coverage. 80% of the time I can see what the coverage is. Sometimes it's a little bit foggy and I'll look at the replay again and try to get a better idea of it. Earlier in the year, Fox, Fox a lot of times will show all 11. So there were some broadcasts earlier in the year when it was FS1 or Big Ten Network, they'd show all 22. And that was great because you can see what's going on. ABC zooms in, garbage, in my opinion. I kind of wish you could switch it, the mega casts, you can, some of those things on ESPN, you can choose whichever version of the broadcast you want. I wish we could choose to get all 22. Let me find my notes here. I was hoping Big Moobie would come on and talk a little bit, but he must have nodded off. Have to do a skull session with him. I'm going to be busy tomorrow. I'm busy Thursday. I'm going to post also. It's not going to be a pre-snap read this week. I meant to put that at the beginning of the pre-snap read last week. Thanksgiving with the basketball tournament, Michigan State and all that stuff, and work and family Thursday, Friday. Not going to be able to do pre-snap read this week. So holiday, Thanksgiving, we've not done them in the past sometimes, and that'll be the case this week. So no pre-snap read on Friday, maybe a skull session in lieu of that later this week to get that going. But I just had it. Now what do I do with it? Make sure to give us a thumbs up, everybody. Subscribe to the channel. We appreciate all those subscribers both here and at the website, SpartanMag.com. What is going on here? There's that. There it is. Just hiding behind some windows, some screens over here. All right. some of you guys don't like it when we get deep into some technical stuff, but you guys saw most of what happened in the game. The first drive, first touchdown is a two-deep zone. Olave splits the safeties. And on that one, it looked to me like the linebackers for Michigan State were a little too close together. You should probably have more horizontal spacing with those guys. And Olave, I think it was the number 2 receiver, runs through the linebacker level and gets right to the seam. Here's the other problem. I mean, it's a two-deep zone. Most people teach it that you want to reroute these guys. D'Antonio would talk about it that way and spell it out that way. We knew how D'Antonio, Narduzzi, and Tressel coached. So you saw week after week what they wanted it to look like, and season after season, when you change players, you might see somebody not do it the way Isaiah Lewis would have done it, and then by the end of the season, he would be doing it that way, or he'd be replaced. Same thing with Tom Izzo. You know how gap defense for Tom Izzo, elbow block, nail coverage, on the line, off the line, 1/3, 2/3, help defense on a string. You know how he coaches defense. You know how he coaches box outs. You know how he coaches running the lanes in transition. You know how he coaches the center going to the rim in transition. You've seen it player after player after player for 26 years. You know when somebody's not doing it right, and eventually it gets corrected or he gets replaced. We're still getting a handle on Mel Tucker and his coaches and how they do it, even though we know a lot about Harlan Barnett. And I wish I had a chance to talk to Harlan this week. Didn't get a chance to. For interviews this week, Mel Tucker at his press conference didn't seem real open to talk about what went wrong, X's and O's. And he kind of mentioned, I can't remember his words exactly, but it was something along the lines of, the reason we changed our press conference from Tuesday to Monday is because we come here on Tuesday and everybody would want to talk about the game on Saturday. I'm already thinking about the next game. Same type of tone on Mondays. He talked about after the game, not going to finger point and those things. So I don't think, for whatever reason, to protect his own players or to set the tone from a cultural standpoint, he's not going to come out after a game like that and talk about what went wrong. I think he should, to an extent. I mean, I don't think he needs to come out and say this guy was terrible and name him by name and those type of things. But D'Antonio would come out and say, well, we needed a reroute on the linebacker on that play. And then you can get an idea of what they're correcting. I think, these football head coaching jobs, in a lot of ways, they're political jobs. They have to be politicians. They have to speak to their constituents, the stakeholders, the fans, and let them know what's being fixed, what went wrong, and what's being fixed and what's being done and what it's supposed to look like. He mentioned in the postgame, we have to find out what it is, who, and why, and get it corrected, get in the film, get to practice, get it corrected. That's fine, and you can say that week after week after week, win or lose, which he does, and I understand that. That's a big macro approach to it. But to speak to the constituents, I think you need to get micro once in a while. And there's not a lot of, not everybody wants to hear it that way, but at Spartan Magazine, SpartanMag.com, we've been covering it that way for years and years, and it's part of the reason our brand as a news organization has become pretty strong because there are some Michigan State fans that are interested in those type of things, and we've tried to cover it that way. And a lot of coaches appreciate that. I know Izzo appreciates it. He used to subscribe to the magazine for his dad. D'Antonio used to subscribe for his brother, Spartan Magazine. So we don't want to be wrong. And the way we do things, we're not going to spell it out and say so-and-so sucks and he needs to be kicked off the team and he needs to get a scholarship revoked. We're not going to go that way. I mean, we're not here to embarrass anybody. We're just trying to find out what went wrong, and whether it can be fixed. Michigan State's had defensive backs, going back some years in the Perlis years where they had corners. We talked about it last week when they played Notre Dame. They weren't covering Lake Dawson no matter who they put in the game. They just didn't have the guy to cover that guy. Last week against Ohio State might have been the same type of thing. You're not going to win a drag race with Michigan State's defensive backs against those guys. So how do you fudge it a little bit? You got to be perfect with your zone defenses and disguise things and try to Iowa it as best as you can. And even Iowa gave up 380 against Purdue through the air. And that's an Iowa team that was just loaded with veteran players that have played that same system year after year after year, and they just fix it to where those windows are so small in that zone defense, and they arrive and hit really well. Michigan State, these defensive backs are still new to one another, and it's late in the season. That's not an excuse anymore. They were better in the beginning of the year than I expected, but it's hard to have that Iowa level of excellence in just 1 year. there. So that's what you have to do if you can't win these drag races. But even that, it's just, I mean, there might not be a team that stops Ohio State. We'll see what Michigan can do with them this weekend on offense. And then we might have to wait to see then we might see Ohio State against Alabama. But if Alabama loses 2 games, if they lose to Georgia, they bounced out of the top 4. Ohio State's going to be number 2. I didn't see the rankings today. I assume they're number 2. But let me check here and make sure everything's okay. Ohio State against Alabama. This year, Alabama does not look like Alabama. Now, you give Alabama a month to prepare for a college football playoff semifinal. Maybe they can square some things around. But that Ohio State offense, I kind of hope Ohio State avoids Alabama. I like to see Ohio State go to the national championship game unscathed and play Georgia and have the best offense against that Georgia defense and throw them out there and let's see what happens. There's a chance this Ohio State offense is just this year's version of last year's Alabama and 2019's LSU. That might be what college football is now, that whoever has that offense that's just unstoppable, that becomes the national champion. Will it turn out that way this year? I'm not sure, but Ohio State versus Georgia, if Ohio State can beat Alabama, it might take some bruises to do that. But that could set up just a tremendous game, Ohio State against Georgia. When you talk about one of the great defenses in recent memory against this year's best offense, that would have a chance to maybe prove that they have one of the better offenses in history. Anyway, first touchdown, 7-0. Didn't get a reroute from Halliday. That's the way it looked to me. I would have liked to have talked to Barnett and some of those guys and say, hey, did you need to get a reroute from your linebacker on that? And he might say, yeah, off the record or whatever. And then I can say it. I'm not here to I'm not here to embarrass anybody, but the constituents want to know some answers about some of these things. That Olave just zoomed right through. You need your linebacker to hold him up a little bit, reroute him so that safety, as they read it, they can get there and close that seam a little bit more. That's the way D'Antonio taught it. That's the way Saban taught it. I heard Bill Parcells talking about it with Eli and Peyton on Monday during Monday Night Football. They were asked, what would you do to play defense against Brady? And everybody talks about the importance of pass rush and all that, but Parcells was talking about, I'd want to obstruct the receivers from getting into their routes on time. And he used an old school word. He said, get into their patterns. Nobody talks about pass patterns anymore. Back in the 70s and 60s, there was a pass pattern. And a pattern isn't one particular route. A pattern is the group of routes. Now it's called route combinations or concepts, but like 4 people out on a pattern all doing, the whole picture is a pattern. Individual routes making up a pattern. But he said, obstruct them getting into their patterns, which is an old school way of saying get a reroute on those guys. Didn't get a reroute from the linebacker at that level. And Olave runs too quickly that when he's gone, he's gone. Also, the 2 safeties, Gross and Henderson, you go back and look at it, and Henderson, and we could do video here, but we don't do video because you get into copyright situations. And it's legal, but then it's just, we don't. I might do some still photos if I had time to put some things together in the future, but no video at this time. Anyway, Henderson, as good as he's been, and I thought Henderson was playing at an All-American level in the first 6 or 7 games, and he played more snaps than anybody in the country through the first 2/3 of the season. Now Gross has played more than Henderson because Henderson sat out the second half of the game on Saturday. Gross may be playing more plays than anybody in the country. If Henderson had that title a month ago or 2 weeks ago, I think Gross probably, I've not looked it up, but I think there's a good chance Anselo Gross has played more defensive snaps than any player in the country. He's had some struggling times, but he's still hitting hard and playing hard. Anyway, 2 safeties in the middle. I can't remember if it's probably cover 4. They did very little cover 2 that I saw. They did some cover 6 once or twice, I think. Once or twice. Anyway, it's mostly cover 4. Red zone. And Henderson is got his shoulders turned to the sideline this way. And Olave goes between them here. I don't know why his shoulders were turned. There was not really a threat this way. There's reason and logic for everything, and he does a lot of film study. Maybe out of that look all year, Ohio State has broken that off to a corner route, and maybe he was overplaying that. I don't know. But his shoulders were this way, and he's a veteran player. I'm not sure. And Henderson didn't come for interviews today either. He's been speaking for the team a lot, wins and losses this year. Very quotable young man. We appreciate him coming to the press conferences and providing some insight for the team. Didn't come out today. maybe Michigan State, from a PR standpoint, trying to divert the narrative away from the pass defense. I'm not sure, but Tucker didn't want to talk about it much. Okay. And then today, the defensive assistant coach that came out was Ron Burton, defensive line. Okay. We really appreciate that assistant coaches come out and speak to media on Tuesday. That's something Mel Tucker has wanted to do for his program, for his assistant coaches, because when he coached for Nick Saban, no assistant coaches were allowed to talk to the media ever, all season. The only time assistant coaches spoke with the media for Alabama was at the bowl game, because some bowl games required it. If you come to our bowl game on the 3 days before the bowl game is played, we'll have both coordinators for both teams available. That's the only time Saban would ever let his coaches talk. I got a funny story about that also with McElwain, Jim McElwain, when he was coordinator at Alabama, and Saban wasn't there for that one, but I'll tell that story some other day. Anyway, so Mel Tucker wants to give his assistant coaches a chance to do media. He thinks it's good for them, good for their careers, good for the team, good for the public, all those things. And thank goodness. I appreciate that also. So we had Burton today. So Burton's not really going to speak about the defensive backfield either. So Tucker didn't speak about it. Burton didn't speak about it. Would have loved to have had Hazelton there today, or Tillman, or Barnett. No, it was D-line coach. Okay. As far as players go, there were no defensive backs that spoke. So we couldn't really get any answers. Those are some questions that I might table for off-season things, team and program development, that we can touch back on again later in the year. Like, why did you needed a reroute there, right? And did Henderson think that there was going to be a corner route? There's usually logic to everything that happens. And like Mel Tucker says, there's a history to every single play. So the history of that play, that whatever motion took place before snap, pre-snap, and how those two receivers came into the pattern, to use a Bill Parcells word, came in single file. And that can be really difficult against the zone because even in man-to-man, if the corner's out there, if they're going to banjo it, or a lot of times it's like the coverage is one guy has the outside release and one guy has the inside release. And the longer those receivers can avoid declaring who's inside and outside, the later that those defensive backs can react to it. So they came and they were coming right at Henderson, and one of them, Olave, didn't get a reroute, and Henderson turned his shoulders that way. So maybe he's expecting this, but this is what happened, and it's wide open. So every play has a history. I'm not sure what the history was. I'd like to talk to Henderson about it. I'd like to talk to Barnett about it. But we don't get a lot of chance to talk to them. At the podium, I'm not going to ask them about it at the podium. In years past, after they talk on Wednesdays, I might get like one or two questions in, just one-on-one, just because it helps us get an idea at SpartanMag.com what went on, that we can relay some of it to the readers. Not all of it. Some of it's off the record. Some of it's just going to be so I know. Some of it is to confirm that I saw what I thought I saw. Some of it is so they can correct me and say, no, Comp, you got this wrong. This is what it was, and this is what we thought it was going to be, and this is why this happened. Then I know. And some of those things I'm not going to ask them at the podium, because a lot of the other people in the press corps, that just wastes time for them. We only get 7 or 8 questions, and I don't want to get too deep into a technical question, because then, other people will be like, man, those questions, for the press pool in general, we could use better things. Secondly, if I'm going to ask a question that detailed, I kind of want it just for Spartan Mag. I don't want everybody else to get it, if you can understand that from a competitive standpoint, because it's a business for us too. Just trying to be fair all the way around. Anyway, that's what happened on the first touchdown. Second touchdown, 14-0, 77-yard touchdown. Looked to me like Michigan State was in cover 3 robber, because Henderson was up near the linebacker level, like doing a robber. But the cover 3, Gross didn't quite get. If it's cover 3, the other safety's got to get to center field right now, or at least to the center of the formation. And was he a little late over there, or did he think, was Henderson supposed to stay back? I'm not sure. There was a dig route. Did Henderson come up on that dig? That's the thing about Ohio State. I mean, you got a dig going this way, and it's hard to cover that dig, so he's going to come up on that. And then you've got the deep one to, I think it was Wilson. They've just got jet fighters all over the place that you have to cover. So Henderson's got to make a decision. If it was cover 4, he's got to stay deep as the deepest and help Kimbrough on that one. So Kimbrough's got outside technique. Here's the thing. He was up in press, Kimbrough was, but it's outside technique, which indicates zone, and he's expecting safety help. And he takes that skinny post, take off, and he doesn't get any safety help because Henderson's in up close on that dig, or he's doing robber technique. And Gross doesn't get over there either. He's late. He's not late if it's cover 4. He is late if it's cover 3. I'm not sure what it was. So Michigan State kind of ends up in no man's land on that thing. They didn't do either. They didn't have a deep center field on cover 3, or if it's cover 4, Henderson, was concerned about the dig. So in the meantime, what I don't know, a lot of times when Michigan State would play press quarters, and this was press, and I think it was quarters, but it was outside technique. The way they used to do it with Narduzzi and those guys, they'd go inside technique, and it becomes man-to-man, man-match. But Barnett back then would want an offhand jam, and he'd want a jam, and don't let him run through the tee. If you make yourself a tee like this, if the receiver's coming through your arms, there's got to be contact. And there was no offhand jam, there was no contact, and he kind of ran through the tee, but didn't get obstructed. So that's not the way they used to teach it. So goes by him, and did Kimbrough underestimate Wilson's acceleration? Maybe so. But anyway, he's pressing, but doesn't contact him, doesn't jam him, and he runs through the tee. So pressing really did nothing. It takes away a quick hitch, but it didn't really obstruct anything. And boom, now you're losing a drag race, and you don't have safety help. So I'm not exactly sure how they're teaching the corner technique there. And when Tucker talks about technique and fundamentals, maybe some of that went out the window there. I'm not sure. It's late in the season for that to be happening, but that's what went on in that one. Could have used more speed with that guy, but not many people are running with that guy anyway. And if you're going to be pressing with that guy, you better get some safety help. Didn't get safety help. So same pageness, or just did he bite on the dig? Not sure, but it was sloppy. 14-0. Now it's 21-0, 43-yarder to Olave. And on that one, Gross didn't get as deep as the deepest. Lowry that time was an off coverage, not pressing. He's an off, and he turns with him, and the guy accelerates. Olave accelerates, and Lowry just can't get up to speed to run with him. Maybe underestimated that speed, but by the time he turns to go, it's too late. And Gross didn't get as deep as the deepest. Comes up. I can't remember if Gross got influenced up by something underneath or not. But deep middle safety, you got to get. You have to, deep is the deepest. That's the way it's always been taught. I assume that's the way they do it now also. Didn't happen. And so it's a combination of speed and safeties, in my opinion, not providing help where they should. So there's a same pageness there that I thought was alarming, a lack of same pageness that has not been a problem earlier in the year. Now, because they're losing 21-0, 14-0, 28-0, did guys start to fog out and panic a little bit and start wondering, geez, man, we're screwed. We can't cover these guys. I don't know. Does that enter into it? Maybe. 28-0, Jordan Simmons. 21-0, Jordan Simmons fumbles. By the way, Michigan State's offense was not terrible at the beginning. Ohio State gets it 7-0. Michigan State gets a couple of first downs, throws it to Tyler Hunt, move the chains a little bit. Was that the one? And then they got a couple first downs, end up punting. Now it's 14. Then they get it again. Now it's 14-0. Michigan State's driving. Peyton Thorne making some decent throws into decent coverage. Kenneth Walker with a couple decent runs. Nice throw to Jaden Reed on back shoulder. Then they go back to him and he catches it. Remember, he stretches forward and fumbles it. They're lucky that they didn't give that to Ohio State, but they called it incomplete. Michigan State misses a field goal. If he catches that one, goes down, it's 4th and 1. I would have liked to have seen what would happen if Michigan State converts that in 4th and 1. Do they go ahead and score and cut it to 14-7? Now each team has had the ball twice. Michigan State a couple first downs, punt. They score twice, 14-7 ball game maybe. I'm not saying they would have hung in it, but Michigan State might have forged that competitive Saturday that many of us expected. A lot of us expected that game to be something in the 40s to something in the 20s. And Michigan State's inability to keep up on offense was one of the surprises. But some of the things that Michigan State did early were not so bad. But anyway, now it's 21-0. Michigan State now, Kenneth Walker is injured. He's limited. So Jordan Simmons getting some carries. And on the carry where he fumbled, he was in the middle of gaining about 6 or 7 yards, which would have set up like third and a yard and a half. He fumbles. You're down 21-0. He fumbles. It's your third drive. I told you what happened in the first two drives. almost scored on one and wasn't so bad on this one. And this drive's not looking so bad. They got in a first down. Now they fumble. And they score. Now it's 28-0. And now just everything's out the window. All right, so fumble at 21-0. And Ohio State gets a short field at like the 40-yard line. They get down to the 5 or 4 yard line for a 4-yard touchdown. At this point, Kimbrough allows an inside release, and Xavier Henderson blitzes. He was the safety on that side, so I don't think he was wrong. Quavaris crouches in the area, so is that linebacker supposed to drop? Anyway, the corner, Kimbrough, who I think could have squeezed down and reduced the daylight on that. There's a lot of daylight, and he's got an open slant. But if he's playing outside technique and allowing that slant, he's expecting somebody in the middle to show up, a safety or usually a safety, to show up, and just, play the other half of kind of a bracket situation there. There's nobody there. It's wide open, easy 4-yard touchdown. Now, at this point, Michigan State is just like fogging out. I mean, that shouldn't happen in championship November. Henderson, like I said, blitzed. Did he miss a call and was supposed to stay back? Doubtful. Was the linebacker supposed to drop? Quavaris crouches the linebacker in the area. I don't know. But Kimbrough, there was no other receiver out there, so if he's got to break off to someone else, maybe you can't squeeze it as much, but there's no other receiver threat, so he should have squeezed daylight in there a little bit more. But that was just a bust. Now it's 28-0. That's not getting beat athletically. That's just not showing up to the shooting match, as Nick Saban would say. 28-0. Then 35-0 on the 1-yard run. That was on the over-the-shoulder catch. 42-0 on an RPO to Garrett Wilson. Again, Gross has man-to-man on Garrett Wilson, and I went back over and watched it again to see what Herbstreit said about it. And he says that is a mismatch, and Herbstreit's trying to be nice to Michigan State, a little bit diplomatic. But you have Gross on a slot, man-to-man. Michigan State's not done that since the Michigan game when Michigan really damaged Gross man-to-man in the slot. So Gross has him off coverage, and it's a little short post or slant, and Gross really has no chance to run with him. But the leverage that he's playing with, it looks like he's expecting safety help. I mean, throughout the course of the day, safety help wasn't showing up. And I don't know if signals were getting crossed, which I think happened in the Purdue game a few times, when Brantley did some things wrong a couple of times. So it's 42-0. It's an RPO. Are they playing the run? Because that's what an RPO kind of causes you to do. The linebackers and Henderson, they were at the linebacker level, but no one was in the middle for Gross. And Herbstreit's quote was, quote, Gross out there one-on-one with Garrett Wilson, it's not going to work out, unquote. That's a diplomatic way of saying that that's not a good coverage situation for Michigan State. So you asked the question about some of those key coverage breakdowns. Now, I realize he threw for 450. That's maybe 200 of them right there. But I mentioned that Michigan State, through most of the year, had not gotten in a situation where players in the defensive backfield, despite giving up so many passing yards all year, Michigan State had not really gotten Beetlejuiced, as I said, where like defensive backs, their heads are spinning around. It's an old Mad Dog DeMarco term. Hadn't really seen athletic beatings. Michigan State's played soft here and there, and bend but don't break. They don't call it that, but that's what it was against Miami. They were concerned about getting beat over the top, so they kept it underneath. They only gave up 17 points that day or whatever, 16. Early in the Northwestern game, the transfer from Missouri deep beat Ronald Williams, but Williams was pretty good the rest of the year. Didn't start the next game, but started the third game. Has been pretty solid. Did not start this game, but ended up playing more snaps than Lowry or Kimbrough. And Ronald Williams didn't get beat in this game. And in the second half, Ronald Williams had a nice stick on a play, caused a fumble. Fumble went out of bounds, but it was a nice hard tackle. Ronald Williams, I think, also had a good game against Maryland. So I think Ronald Williams has played 2 straight good games at corner. But even when Michigan State was giving up a lot of pass yardage through the course of the season, it wasn't like they were getting destroyed athletically, in my opinion, until this game. And you saw it, and Ohio State does that to a lot of teams. And they might be this year's Alabama. They might be this year's 2019 LSU. Maybe nobody can cover these guys. I don't know. We're going to find out next few weeks. But they got beat athletically. Lowry and Kimbrough did. Kimbrough's been sputtering here toward the stretch. He was looking good midway in the midpoint of the season. Lowry was hurt, came along, did all right, got hurt again, came along and hit really well against Maryland. I thought Lowry was hitting really well against Maryland, and he hit pretty well a couple times in this game also. In the post-game VCast, I mentioned the Michigan State's not hitting like they were in October, and they're not, but when I went back and watched the game, Michigan State was hitting better than I gave them credit for, especially Darius Snow. Darius Snow hitting real nicely, hitting hard. And so what's Snow for the future? I mean, he's a good nickel. But in the second half of that game, Xavier Henderson sat, shoulder ailment, and they put Darius Snow at safety. So as a young guy, Darius Snow is able to play nickel and safety. When he's playing safety, he's doing a lot of the communications. Is he fast enough to be the type of safety they need next year? Can he be Xavier Henderson of next year? Maybe so, but man, he's hitting hard and he's doing some good things. So is there a chance you move him back to safety and Gross ends up becoming a nickel? You'll need another safety at some point also. Do you get another safety in the portal? Can Ronald Williams become a safety? These are good questions that I look forward to looking into bowl practice and into the spring. Although Tucker a lot of times doesn't say what's going on. Maybe he will. I'm not sure. But anyway, that's the name of that tune on all that stuff. Let's go over here to the chat area and run through this to make sure I'm not missing on anything. And we'll be wrapping this thing up. Can the Lions beat the Bears? I'm still back down there. Spartan MD says JC is the pass defense having issues due to lack of defensive end production. That's part of it. And, Tucker talks about the importance of the marriage between pass rush and pass defense. They've got to work together. And today, Drew Beasley spoke at the press conference, and he said that the coaches have been on them about that this week, about getting their part of the equation done. Penn State's offensive line has not been great against pass protection. I'm just thinking in the back of my head what I've seen from them. They've just kind of been okay. And they had trouble against Rutgers, but they had true freshmen out there because of their flu situation. Can Beasley and Panishuk ratchet it up this weekend? They're going to need to. Or Michigan State, can they get something going with pressures and stunts? And I'm surprised Michigan State didn't do more pressures. They did some pressures against Maryland in terms of bringing people and dropping linemen, but they had the reasons for what they did against Ohio State, and I'm sure it was based on film and logic, but they didn't do some of the things that they did against Maryland. I realize Maryland's not Ohio State, but Nebraska did a lot of pressures, zone pressures against Ohio State. I don't mean zone blitzes. Zone pressures if only 4 men come. It's 5. A blitz in most football parlance is more than 4 rushing. So you got 4 down linemen, maybe 1 drops into coverage and a linebacker comes on a blitz, or a safety does and 2 drop, or a safety and 1 drops. Anyway, Michigan State did more of that against Maryland, had success with it, especially on 3rd down. Nebraska had success with it against Ohio State, but Michigan State didn't do it. I thought that was interesting. Not that would have worked. I just thought that was an interesting choice. Spartan Marinelli 87 seems a little grouchy. If you guys want to rewind him, if you go back up to the screen, you can probably see which questions I'm about to take on. Spartan MD says, anything cooking with the PF from Houston transferring for basketball? Danger. I don't have anything on that, but I'll look into that. Ben Chi says that was an embarrassment for sure. Not satisfied with beating Michigan and getting crushed by Ohio State anymore. Beat Penn State, that'd be great. Mike K says, Spartan MD says, Michigan State does not have the depth to compete this year with national championship contenders, but I'm optimistic Tucker will develop a more talented roster. That's got to be the hope right now. And yeah, no news flash that Michigan State cannot go 15 rounds toe-to-toe with Ohio State. Everybody should have known that back in August. Even with Michigan State's storybook season and creating a lot of hope for that particular game, and especially without the explosiveness that Michigan State had on offense earlier in the year with Naylor and Reed and a healthier Walker. I think Michigan State on its best day could have hung in there and lost 42-21 or something like that. Matthew Johnson says, tardy, but first live in a while. Actually, we had a live last week and the week before, so maybe you're saying this is your first one in a while. Spartan Marinelli says, I expected to lose. I just thought we would be able to compete with Ohio State a little bit. Fair statement. Spartan MD says, Ohio State is my second favorite team this Saturday. Spartan Marinelli says, I still believe that Mel Tucker is the man for us, and I'm really happy with the season this year. Spartan Marinelli is bringing some strong, heartfelt opinions. I can respect that. Mike K says, why no injury reports in college? Pee break at concert right now. Mike K on a pee break at the concert. Well, Mike, you got to tell us what concert you're at. Come on, man. And you posted that a while ago, so you might be through the concert and back out in the parking lot by now. Taking a pee break at a concert was always a tough decision, wasn't it? You're like, man, can I make it through this whole concert? Or am I going to continue to enjoy this, or do I need to? Do I go right now during this song that I don't really like? You guys been there before? You know what I'm talking about? For instance, it doesn't help anymore because they're never going to play again. But if you ever saw Van Halen, the time to go to take a pee break was when Michael Anthony did his bass solo, right? You got my back on that one? What's that? We got a super chat. Kana 1005. Thanks, Kana. Or is it Kana? 1005. Appreciate tip jar. Personal sponsorship from Kana 105. And we'll go right to his comment. It says, great stuff, Comp. You said earlier this year, watch out if Tucker is able to have a great season in terms of recruiting. Do you still feel that way? Biggest hurdles MSU to be elite is recruiting, ? I'd agree with all that. Yeah, watch out. With that type of success, we'll see what he does now. So keep an eye on that 2023 recruiting class, and we will see how they finish out here in 2022. I would expect a top 20 class next year for 2023. We'll see what happens. I think Tucker's going to be going after it. Spring and the summer is going to be key because that's when a lot of recruiting gets done. But thanks a lot for that personal sponsorship. Really appreciate it. I have to go back to my place now. All right, I might have missed some, but let's go here. Douglas Lett says, Ohio State fans, Spartans' problem was Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama in league of their own. We have wide receivers that will be playing on Sunday next year, others on bench that would start for other teams. That's true about Ohio State. On their bench, they got a guy named Fleming, and they've got Marvin Harrison Jr. Yeah, they'd be starting for other teams. Exactly right. Stephen Leaf says, is it conceivable that K9 is coming back next year? I doubt it. No, it's time. I mean, he's taken some lumps this year. He came to Michigan State as a business decision, and I think the next business decision is to go pro. And I don't see his stock increasing next year any more than it is right now. And why take hits next year for free when you can get paid next year? I know you can get paid in college these days, but probably, you only have X number of years to make it in the NFL. So I doubt it. Ice cream cake, says Mike K. I don't know what that's about. Is that a Jeff Beck reference? Ben Chi says, I would be shocked if K9 returns. Jason K says, is Jarrett Horst done for the season? That's my understanding. I would not hold my breath on that one. It's my understanding. Okay, I'm not saying that's definitely the deal, but unless something changes. Stephen Ilef says, does Max shoot lefty or righty? I thought I saw him shoot a jumper righty and free throws lefty. Akins shoots left-handed. Gabe Brown shoots left-handed. Christie's right-handed. I don't think I've ever seen him shoot left. Maybe in the lane he might switch to the left. Good question. I didn't notice that. Caught me on that one. I like to think that I look at things closely, but all right. Steve Meyer says, hi, Comp from McKinney, Texas. Coming up for the Penn State game. Only missed one home game this year, the Western Kentucky game. Steve Meyer. Good for you, man. Good for you. For Steve Meyer from Texas, only missed one home game. Steve Ilef says, Buckeyes have outstanding wideouts, maybe all-time best, people say. I don't know who's considered having the best wide receiver core of all time in college football. Some of those Hurricane teams, I don't know who that would be. We'll have to wait and see what these guys do. And truthfully, we'll have to wait and see what they do in the pros and grade it retroactively. But they're certainly electric and productive right now. And like I said before, we'll see if they can continue to do it as the opponents get better. I'm starting to run out of voice, so I'm going to go back over here to the mailbag, then we'll come back over here to the comments area for more. Question 7, T-Dub from Delta Township says, I really like the way Max Christie plays, and Jaden Akins was my pick to be a lot better than people were thinking. In saying that, what do you think of Pierre Brooks so far? He says, he seems to be very stiff in his play, not fluid. Thanks for all that you and your group do. That's T-Dub from Delta Township. Pierre Brooks, I think he's carrying a little too much weight. So, he's a muscular guy in the weight room. He just kind of naturally puts on mass. So, do they need to curtail that a little bit? They're keeping an eye on his weight because he cannot afford to carry any more. He's got good shot making skill, but you've got other people on the court that can make shots too. So you're not going to clear out and have him go to work. I mean, he can, if the offense comes to him, he can finish, but I'm not sure he can outscore the deficiencies at the other end. Stiff, you said he looks a little stiff. Stiff's one way to say it. I just think he's got some bad weight and a little slowish, kind of, I used to compare him to, who was the guy? There's a guy that transferred out a couple years ago to a mid-major. Ohio kid. Javon Bess. Reminds me of that a little more shot-making skill than Bess. But, Brooks is kind of a tweener guy. He's not big enough to be a 4, and is he quick enough to be a 3? I don't know. He's going to have to reshape his quickness. Randy from Orange County, California says, I think I remember Big Mooby saying at some point that he saw a number of fundamental issues with our pass defense. Do you think that's still a huge problem, or is it a combination of that along with lack of talent, speed, and the amount of time the defense has been on the field? The amount of time the defense has had on the field is an interesting one. We've been talking about that at the Underground Bunker message board increasingly this week. Michigan State's played more defensive snaps than anybody in the Big Ten, maybe more than anybody in the country. I think somebody said that if you look at it by comparison, Minnesota, Michigan State's played like 4 more games than Minnesota. So, fundamental issues with the pass defense, I talked about some of those a minute ago, whether it be individual fundamentals are they asking for an offhand jam on that? Do they want him to not run through the tee? Do they want some contact when they're playing press? Or, technique or fundamentals. That's fundamentals. Technique is the shoulder turn on that. The first touchdown, when I mentioned Xavier Henderson had a shoulder turn, is he anticipating a corner and it ends up being something to the seam. So there's a combination of that, and then some athleticism, some same-pageness. Some of it might be on the field so long. A little bit of all of that. That's a compound negative interest. What would be the opposite of compound interest? Diminishing returns from Michigan State's poor third down defense all year. When you can't get off the field, you're playing more snaps in a given game. That adds up. And then also Michigan State's offense being as explosive as it is, putting the defense right back on the field. That's great to have scores on the scoreboard, but in November, does that hurt you a little bit? And then on offense, you're playing up tempo. Does that hurt you a little bit? Are you better off being like D'Antonio or Kirk Ferentz, playing slower and giving your defense more rest? Helps you in November? I don't know. These are things when you self-scout that you might look at. When Jim Harbaugh first became head coach at Michigan, they were really strong in September and October, half of October. Really good. Remember that? They used to shut people out, 31-0, 34-0. Really good. And they famously and very proudly had 3-hour practices. Harbaugh would have he'd keep the coaches on the field for 5 hours, and half the team would practice for 2 hours, and they would overlap a little bit, and the other half of the team would practice for the last 2 hours, and they were physical and all those things. Well, this year, you think back to it, Michigan State was very physical in the preseason, we heard, and physical during the early, physical Tuesdays, even in September after the season had already started. And that made for a very good physical, hard-hitting team in September and into October. I'm wondering if that gets revisited a little bit. We'll see what they look like this Saturday. They'll continue to learn from it, whatever it turns out to be. Question number 9, Junior in Chelsea, JR from Chelsea, Michigan. Chelsea playing for a state championship this weekend, by the way. He says, he wants some health updates. He says, will these players play? Jaden Reed, Jalen Naylor, Kenneth Walker III, Xavier Henderson, Quavaris Crouch. And that's his question. He also asks, will Horst be back in 2022? Jaden Reed, I don't know. Jalen Naylor, I wasn't thinking so. I was thinking he was done, for the regular season. But him showing up in practice this week on that hype video and back in the background, interesting. So I'm not saying no on him. Kenneth Walker III, I saw him earlier today. Looked like he was in good spirits. Like I said, I didn't look to see if he had a wrap on or anything like that. But Kenneth Walker III is going to play. I don't know. I'm expecting him to play. I don't know how many runs he has in him. It might be like last week. He might only have 5 or 10 runs in him. I'm not sure. Xavier Henderson had that shoulder situation. I'm assuming he's playing. Interesting that he didn't come to interviews today. I can understand part of it. But, is there a chance that they went home and looked at it and there's a problem? I don't know. I'm expecting Xavier Henderson to play. He was advised to sit out in the second half. That's a guy that could have used a break there in the second half against Ohio State. I'm expecting Xavier Henderson to play. Quavaris Crouch came back, played in this game. I don't see a problem with him. He finished the game healthy as far as I know. Simeon Barrow, I'm not expecting him to play. That's just my expectations. The coaches don't release injury information. So you're asking me a question. That's what I'm thinking. I've been wrong before. Horst, will he be back in 2022? I think he can come back. I think he can use a COVID year, but I'm not expecting that. Not expecting it. MSU, this is question number 10. MSU Spartan 777 from New Hudson, Michigan says, our defensive backs are a weak link this year, and it is even a tougher spot with the lack of pass rush. Who do you think are the 2 weakest cover defensive backs this year? End of the question from MSU Spartan 777 from New Hudson, Michigan. The weakest cover guys. Here at the end of the year, Kimbrough struggled a little bit more than Lowry or Ronald Williams. So I'm going to say Kimbrough, but I think he's got the capacity to do better. Kimbrough and Angelo Gross would be my answer right now. And those are the ones that are starting. The guys that are not playing are even worse, obviously. Question number 11, Sherlock H. from Sterling Heights says, James Franklin of Penn State just got a $7.5 million contract per year for 10 years. If he had left Penn State, who would have Penn State have gotten? And what do you think of this move by Penn State? If he would have left, I don't know who they would have went after. I don't know, but $7.5 million, that's a lot for a guy that's been, he's done some things in recruiting. He's had some good teams. He's had some trouble getting over the top. He's had some rankling relationships with locals there. There was some chants at the end of the Michigan game of fire Franklin. So the natives they think they are in favor of him. And 2 or 3 weeks ago, when he would not come out and say that he was staying, that kind of rankled some people. And 7-4, 8-4 season, not great. So I could see a situation. It's not happened, but like last year when they had the COVID year and they started out 0-5 or 0-4. If that were to happen again, I think the fans at Penn State are good fans and expect a lot, but they're not as stupid as the fans in the SEC. Did I just say that? I'm sorry. I apologize for the strong language. I posted that in the Underground Bunker message board a couple of days ago that the fans in the SEC are great and they're passionate, and that's one of the strengths of each of those programs down there, but it's also a detriment. Right now, 10 of the 14 teams in the SEC have coaches that are in their first year, second year, or no coach at all. So only 4 of the 14 teams have coaches that have coached more than 2 seasons. And I ended that by saying down there, pressure is not creating diamonds, it's busting pipes. Is it creating diamonds in Georgia? Maybe so. It's busting pipes everywhere else. Tennessee, I mean, they might have it right with Heupel right now, but the way they just go through coaches like Dental Floss, they got some programs that are failing to gain traction because of the way they're getting rid of coaches. The one program that maintained patience with a coach is Kentucky with Stoops. He started out like 5-7, 5-7, 7-5, 6-6. Would have never gotten to a 5th season if he were coaching at Ole Miss. Old Mississippi. I don't even like to say Ole Miss. What the heck's Ole Miss? I say Ole Miss like that's some great thing. Ole Miss. I'm from Ole Miss. Like that's some great thing. The old Mississippi I read about ain't so great. Did I say that? I apologize if I offended anybody. But anyway, I think Penn State, they've got serious fans, but he's one season away, like one of those 4-8 seasons away from getting in some real big trouble there. Now, if he were in the SEC, he would have already been in trouble and gotten run out of town. But where he stands now at Penn State, he's got a chance to. They almost had a really good year this year, so they're knocking on the door. So, $7.5 million, 10 years. 10 years is a long time. See, I don't think Penn State needed to. I mean, Franklin he's doing okay, but was Penn State really worried that he was going to go to USC? Is that why they paid him that much? He's been there that long. Penn State might have been like, I don't think Penn State needed to pay him that much. They might have been, all right, yeah, if you want to go, you got a good contract right now, but if you want to go, go. Giving him 10 years when he's this many years into it, and you've seen where he is and, how things are going, I think Penn State could have let him walk. But instead, Penn State buckled in 10 years. So if he has like one of those 4 and 8 years, a 10-year deal, that's going to be a big buyout. Do you have to pay him for the remainder of the 9 years? If he has one of those seasons that the fans just don't accept it anymore. That's what happens in the SEC. The fans get to a point where it's just unacceptable, and they beat the pots and pans together so much, and that it especially today with internet and social media, it infiltrates the locker room. And at some point, the head coach, the Bastille has been stormed. And you lose the team. That's what happened in Florida. Mullen lost the team. At LSU, what's his name, Orgeron, kind of lost the team because it just, the torches and pitchforks just become overwhelming. It's happened in Tennessee too. Butch Jones had a couple decent seasons and then lose a couple games and pitchforks come out and you can't coach your team anymore because that stuff infiltrates the locker room. That's why Tucker was talking about that this week, not about that specifically, but he was telling his people, hold on, Tucker. Tucker was telling his, saying that, telling the people, the players, that the true experts are the people in this room. That's what D'Antonio used to say. In other words, don't listen to the noise on the outside. Back in summer when everybody was picking Michigan State to finish last in the Big Ten East, he says, we weren't aware of that because we didn't listen to it. And now that people are talking about us being in the top 10 in the playoffs, we're not aware because we didn't listen to that. We're not going to listen to this. And now that, as he said, we got blown out by Ohio State, we're not going to listen to what's going on the outside again. I'm paraphrasing there. And that's a good, consistent approach to have because at some point when you have a season like Florida is having this year, you can continue to say, hey, we're not listening to outside voices. We are in this room. This is what we do. And the reason he's saying that now and building that firewall and that culture is to protect against one of those crazy seasons. Because if a crazy season like that happens, you can keep the pitchforks and the torches at bay. But down south, it gets out of control. So, that's the name of that team. What happened? We got Alex Moore. Thanks to Alex Moore with the super chat. Personal sponsorship of tonight's Spartan Mag Live. And we are past the 11 o'clock hour Eastern time. We got to wrap this up pretty quick. Alex Moore says, is Cedric Irvin's son looking at Michigan State? I heard he is a highly recruited running back. Do you think SEC transfers will be our best hope? He's already, that's the end of the question there. He's already committed somewhere else. What did he commit to? Did he commit to Notre Dame or Stanford or something? He looked at Michigan State, but it didn't go very far for some reason. That was kind of an interesting recruitment. But SEC transfers, you might see one or two, a few more of those. I don't know if that's the great way to go. Ronald Williams out of Alabama has been a pretty good one. Chester Kimbrough's been pretty good. I think he's got a good future. Did not play well against Ohio State. Harold Joyner, transfer from Auburn, has been, third string, hasn't really. When I look at Harold Joyner, He does not look like a running back. He looks like Benny Fowler. Benny Fowler's a good athlete, but that's not what tailbacks look like. And a lot of times in this sport, form follows function, and he looks like a wide receiver. Quavaris Crouch transferred in from Tennessee, has been hot and cold, good hitter, plays hard. Not sure he's always got all the assignments down all the time, which is kind of understandable sometimes, but if you had him for 3 or 4 years, maybe it'd be better. I'm not sure. He's a junior. He'll be back next year, I'm guessing. All right, back here in the mailbag, Eric, en route from Columbus, currently in Tuckerstown, Bermuda, says, how about using thread title subjects from the underground bunker as questions? Kind of an underground bunker potluck. Thanks for the suggestion, Eric, en route from Bermuda. Question number 13. By the way, if you're not familiar, the Underground Bunker message board is the church of what's happening now with Michigan State sports over at SpartanMag.com. Underground Bunker message board, accessed only by paying subscribers. Become a subscriber. Check it out over there. You'll like it. I promise you, you'll like it. Well, some people don't like it, but a lot of people, if you're watching this, then you'll probably like it. Check it out, SpartanMag.com. Tell your loved ones to get it for you for the holiday season, the gift-giving season. You'll like it. Larry from Washington, Michigan says, who do you expect back as 5th year and 6th year seniors for Michigan State next year? It sounds like that's the end of that question. Sounds like Matt Carrick is going to be back, injured earlier this year before the Michigan game, maybe 2 weeks before the Michigan game. Offensive guard who started last year. This year he was second string. And he was solid. I thought he was pretty solid. He could maybe start next year. So I think he's coming back. Blake Buter is a walk-on. I think he could use, that everyone's got a COVID year. They can come back for a 6th year. Buter wouldn't surprise me if they invite him back. Kevin Jarvis has a COVID year he can use. Does he want to come back? Would not shock me. And this offensive line for Michigan State was at its best in the Michigan game. Some of those run plays, and it was at its best with Jarvis and Arcuri really got it together at right guard, right tackle for that game. Specifically, that TKO touchdown run. The touchdown run, what was that? That fold, like a fold lead, where Tucker folds into the A-gap, and Allen blocks his guy this way, Arcuri this way, and Walker ran right to the revolving door. And when he got there, the door revolved. Boom, touchdown. But Jarvis was good on that play. Jarvis and Arcuri were at their best in that game against Michigan. And they've been playing together here and there for the last couple of years. They both get injured. Now this year, they're finally both on the same side of the line. And the Michigan game, they were at their best. And that was the last time they ever played next to each other. Because then Horst is unavailable. So Arcuri moves over to left tackle, and then Arcuri and Jarvis are no longer playing together, which is one of the unfortunate things about offensive line play for the second half of the season for Michigan State, the last 1/3 of the season, I would say. Jarvis, not sure. Would not shock me if he comes back. I'll ask around on that one a little bit. Drew Jordan is a senior. I think he's got a COVID year. Everybody's got a COVID year, right? I think. This is Jordan's first year at Michigan State. I think he can come back. I don't know if he will, but they could probably use him. I doubt that Jacob Panasiuk would come back. Had a really good first half of the season. He might think it's just time to move on. He can ask his brother about the league and things like that. Not sure. Tyler Hunt. Would not shock me if he comes back. He's a 5th-year senior now. Could come back as a super senior. Bryce Behringer, I think, has got a year. He can come back. And that's a guy that spent, I think, 2 years out of football, which is amazing. And I think he's got an NFL capabilities. So would he want to go ahead and strike while the iron's hot now and give it a shot in the NFL? I don't know. There's not many punting jobs. There's 32 jobs, and those guys have long careers. There's not a lot of openings there. So might he want to come back? Man, he was valuable this year. They don't beat Penn State without Bryce Behringer. Now, Connor Hayward is leaving. He pretty much said that in so many words at the press conference today. Bjorn from Vallejo, California says, thanks for doing these comp. He says, how do you think this year's offensive line and defensive line will look in the spring? Who do you expect to move on in the spring? You'll have Samac at center. Jarvis, does he come back? Not sure. Buter, does he come back? Not sure. I thought Spencer Brown looked pretty solid in the Maryland game when he played. He played quality minutes, and he looked like an offensive tackle. I think he can play right tackle. Left tackle, Horst, I don't think he's around. I don't think he's available. Our Curry's gone. Would Jarvis move back out to tackle? That's not ideal. I suspect they're going to be looking for an offensive tackle in the portal. J.D. Duplain is back. I think everything looks pretty solid, but left tackle is a pretty important position, and I think left tackle might be a portal situation again. He says, how impactful will the addition of Mike Masunas and Jack Nickel be in the tight end room? I think Nickel's a guy that might be able to play early. They're both bigger tight ends. Tight ends, sometimes it takes them a while to put on the beef and learn everything. Tight end is not always an early impact position. So I'll say it again. I wouldn't be surprised if they go to the portal for a tight end, but I've been saying that for 3 years and they never did. Does Tyler Hunt come back? Hayward's gone. Gillison's going to be gone, I'm guessing. Malik Carr has done some good things this year. He'll need to continue to improve his blocking during spring practice. That's important for him as he becomes a bona fide two-way tight end. You got to be able to block before he can become a downfield threat as a tight end. I mean, he's already a downfield threat, but you need to be able to block so that you're not telegraphing that when number 6 is in the game, you're going to pass. The defense needs to know that when number 6 is in the game, you might run the ball and he might be asked to block. You can't be that predictable based on personnel. And until he becomes a good blocker, you are predictable. But they've had him on the field to block a few times in the last couple of weeks, and he's gotten a little bit better. But that needs to continue to come around. Who's the other tight end I'm forgetting? The kid from Zeeland, number 44, he played one snap against Ohio State. I'm wondering, does he start to focus on baseball? I'm not sure. It's possible. Would not surprise me. I've not talked to him about it, but he didn't play much this year, didn't play much last year. Would not surprise me if, rather than beefing up to play tight end or defensive end, that he just focuses on baseball, because I think he's still a draftable prospect in that sport. Adam Berghorst. There's another tight end I'm forgetting about. Anyway, let's go back over here to the chat area and finish this thing out. Steve S. says, how will the Ohio State loss impact Michigan State's recruiting? Coach Tucker said they will close the gap. Well, it might strengthen Tucker's resolve to, he's always been very ambitious and energetic toward recruiting. That probably even strengthens it even more. I don't think it might hurt. If Michigan State would have won that game or been more competitive, maybe Michigan State could have hung in more strongly with some Ohio recruits for 2023. I can't think of any specific names, for example, but a win or a more competitive game would have helped. That's for sure. Mary Kwasnick says, Gross needs to move back to corner. Need more speed in the back. Are our new recruits faster? Ade Willie is a guy from IMG, and every time I watch IMG, I've not been able to watch him play for some reason. Shannon Blair, he was visiting West Virginia. I'm not sure what's up about that. But they're going to be recruiting speed. The other two safeties are big guys that run well. Not sure they're cover corner guys. Does Michigan State go back to the portal for a cover corner? That's a good question. But, Dylan Tatum runs really well, and he wants to be a defensive back. I think he's more of a ball skill offensive guy. But he can run real well. If he can play safety, he can run really well. I'm just not sure he's a contact guy. He wants to be a DB because I think being a running back at the pro level, some people, I don't know if that's why he doesn't want to play offense in college. For some reason, he thinks he's a DB long term. He's got the feet to do it, runs well. And with the ball in his hands, he's physical. He can, break tackles, and he's tough into the pile. But, he's got a long way to go as a defensive player. He's got the feet to do it. His frame is okay. But I watched every snap of West Bloomfield versus Clarkston, and he's not a contact guy right now. Maybe he can become one, but it's going to take a while. But he's fast. JW says, Gonzaga or UCLA, who you got? When are they playing? I watched that UCLA-Villanova game, and it was entertaining. UCLA was just kind of okay. Gonzaga, who did they play recently? Is Holmgren playing for them? How's he doing? I'd probably lean toward Gonzaga. Unlimited information. Gordon Tonona says, Buford plays Lee County Friday. 2DB state commits. It's good to know. I was not aware of that. Appreciate that, Gordon. That's on Friday. Buford and Lee County. I'd like to have a guy there one of these days. Stephen I. Leaf says, we should have beaten UCLA last year, darn it. I don't disagree with that. Timo Slice says, what's the real story of Horst? Can't say yet. RBJ Photography says, why hasn't Tucker signed his contract yet? That doesn't look good to recruits. Franklin got his done. In the meantime, it's okay for recruits. The best thing for recruits is for Tucker's name to be out there cycling as a desirable coach. Not to the point where it looks like he's flirting and ready to leave all the time, but he says nothing and people talk about him. That's not a bad thing. At some point, there can become a point of diminishing returns on that, but they're not there yet. Mary Kwasnick says, any idea if Keontae Goodwin, the offensive tackle, or Armani Winfield, the wide receiver, any chance they flipped? He says, I'd like to play Kentucky in the Peach Bowl or Gator Bowl. That'd be an interesting one, Michigan State and Kentucky. And it would be there'd be some coaching animosity if it were the D'Antonio era against Stoops and those guys. Even though D'Antonio and the Stoops guys, those guys go back a long way, back to the Youngstown Mafia. But they didn't see things eye to eye in terms of Ohio recruiting. But D'Antonio's not coaching anymore, so it'll be somewhat friendly. You may notice that most opposing coaches are very friendly to Mel Tucker. Pretty friendly to him. They're not rattling his cage much on things. Goodwin, the offensive tackle from Indiana, Michigan State, had a really good chance to flip him from Kentucky about a month ago, 5 weeks ago, but now he's opened it up to Alabama, and there's a new team every week. So that one might not be Michigan State's type of party totally, but Michigan State's not going to quit on that one. So in the past, it'd be like, okay, this is getting away from Michigan State, not going to get them. But like I say, we continue to learn about Michigan State as we go. Can Michigan State stem the tide, turn it back around, and get that guy? I'll believe it when I see it. But I don't think they're going to quit on him. They're going to keep charging. Past Michigan State programs and regimes, that one's getting away, not going to get that kid. But we continue to learn. Wouldn't hold my breath, but we learn as we go, as we watch this team and this staff continue to recruit and build and coach, for better or worse. We learn as we go. And I don't think they'll get Goodwin, but continue to watch that one. As far as Armani Winfield, I'm continuing to hearing good things about that. And I asked Jason Killip about it. Jason Killip does a really good job helping cover recruiting for us, and he feels confident about that one. Armani Winfield, 4-star wide receiver from Texas, committed to the Longhorns, and right now there's a lot of negative drama in Austin about the Longhorns. So for Michigan State to have gotten in on Winfield and to get him to visit back then, I think there's a real good chance Michigan State gets some return on investment on that one. They happen to get in on a wide receiver, 4-star receiver, back when Texas had a commitment from him, when everything looked good at Texas. Now that things don't look good at Texas, Michigan State getting a foot in the door back then could reap some benefits, to the point where I think Jason is kind of expecting Michigan State to get that one. And Jason would know more than I would about that particular recruitment. So that's a 4-star. I think Michigan State's got a shot there. A decent shot. That's G says, think State can win the battle for Atlantis? Go green. Talked about that earlier. Baylor, they're 4-0. Auburn is 3-0. Syracuse is on the other side of the bracket too. They're 2-1. They lost to Colgate. Syracuse lost to Colgate at the Carrier Dome, 100-85. Syracuse gave up 100 points to Colgate. Auburn, I don't know much about Auburn, but Bruce Pearl's a good coach, man. Bruce Pearl's a weird dude, and the rules were always just kind of a suggestion to him and not really rules. But when Michigan State played Tennessee in the regional final in Houston in 2010, Izzo's a great coach. And all great coaches have days when other coaches kind of beat them in tic-tac-toe here and there. Bruce Pearl did some good things in ball screen defense that day that they had a little leg up on Michigan State most of that day. Michigan State did well to come back and win that game and beat Tennessee and go to the Final Four. But Bruce Pearl was really good that day. He's a good coach. Not always the most ethical coach. But nowadays the rules are different in ethics. I don't know if you need ethics anymore. JP says, hey, Comp, what's your honest opinion on keeping Coach Tucker long term? Do you think he can get them a Big Ten championship? Yeah, I think he's capable of winning a Big Ten championship. Long term, I think it's good for Michigan State to keep him. I don't think Michigan State needs to pay him $9 million a year. If that happens, good for him. If Michigan State has people with those type of deep pockets that can get that done, wow, that's a signal of strength. But I think he's getting, about $5 million a year now. He's had a good season, a really good season, ahead of schedule, expected, above expectations. I would expect him to get a sweetener on that contract because there's a lot of, if they don't keep him, if they don't work to keep him, there'll be schools lining up to get him and not just LSU because as programs get filled, others will open up. And I think he's a good enough coach right now and an interesting enough, dangerous coach that you want to keep him. So I would anticipate sweetening that deal. I don't know what the market's saying. Franklin got 7.5. I think 6.5. 9.5, that's great money for him. But it increases the pressure a little bit on you. And he's a guy that, likes, I think he enjoys the support that he gets. When you get something like that, is there a point of diminishing returns there? You can say, hey, man, there's nothing diminishing about $3 million extra a year. I appreciate that, too. He's a businessman. So if someone wants to pay you $9.5, you take it. I'm not sure that's best for him. But I don't have access to his bank account, so I can't exactly say it that way. But K. Klein says the DE only bull rush, need guys that bend and run. Beasley's been pretty good at dipping and turning the corner, but he's been injured. Panashuk has been pretty good at that in the past, but you're right, he was getting swallowed up a little bit more in this one. Slade and Barrow have been good on the inside, but Barrow's not available and Slade's a little bit less. Jordan is not a bend guy, but you're right. If you want really good pass rushers, threaten the outside, bend, get your hips out, ankle flexibility, all that good stuff. They're looking for guys like that. It's a finite resource. There's not a lot of them out there. All right, we better wrap this up. We're heading toward 11:30. Appreciate everybody that stuck around. Let me make sure I don't have any really good, compelling questions that I have to get to. Appreciate all the conversation going on over here. I'm not going to be able to get to all of it. I guess I better just wrap it up. All right, everybody. Did I miss anybody? All right. That's going to do it for another edition of Spartan Mag Live. I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. It's a great week. Spend some good time with your loved ones and enjoy it. And thanks for everybody for coming in here to Spartan Mag Live and having a Tuesday with us here during Thanksgiving week. We will see you next week. And go over to SpartanMag.com. Check us out over there. Once again, appreciate the personal sponsorships we got and the participation we got, both in the mailbag over at the Underground Bunker message board and over here in the chat area. So thanks to everybody. We'll see you next week. In the meantime, happy Thanksgiving. Take care, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving.